Good morning and welcome inside the Down and Friends show here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Thanks for coming along. Patrick Wheeler here with you instead of Robert Allen, covering him for the week. And live from Stillwater, over here, 502 East 6th in Water. And right now, they have what every homeowner, rancher, and farmer needs all under one roof with knowledgeable product specialists to answer your questions and provide a great service and advice, and they will do just that when you come in and see Denise and the crew here at Stillwater Milling Agri Center. Make sure you come check them out, 502 East 6th. They are celebrating 130 years here in 2021. 130 years. Good luck finding a business that has been celebrating that long. All right, so Patrick Wheeler here with you for the rest of this week. We got a lot going on in the world of sports that we're about to dive into. I hope everyone had a fantastic 4th of July weekend. I know I did. Spent a lot of time where there was water. You name it, river, lake. That's where it was, and it was the best time. Obviously, in summer, that's always fun. I hope everyone else took full advantage of some of the nice weather we had and enjoyed their 4th of July weekend. And we're going to get right back into sports here momentarily. Jordan Woodruff will be along with me this week as well. We'll have a number of guests coming up this week, including today. Tom Dorado should join us, I believe, in the 11 o'clock hour, which is always a fun time when Tom and I get into some different things. So we'll dive into that later on too. And Jordan, thanks for being on as well, man. How was the extended weekend for you?
Oh, great. Did the usual, went back home. 4th of July weekend's always kind of a big weekend. Go back. We kind of have a get-together with family and friends. Get to see a lot of people I only get to see about once a year. And, didn't get to sneak off, do any fishing, do anything like that. Didn't get out to the water quite like you did, but still it was great just to be able to see everybody. And with the new baby, it was even, a lot of people that hadn't seen the baby in person yet. All they seen is Facebook pictures from my wife. They got to see and hold the baby for the first time. So that was a lot of fun to see that.
Yeah, that's really cool for sure, and finally get that chance here in July. So that's always a good thing too. Jordan's the new dad over there, rocking the new dad roles that he's had to take on. So that's one of them for sure.
I can officially say I have a dad.
I want to
bod
dive
now.
into. Yeah, well, exactly. I figured that as soon as you had the kid, that was going to be a part of it. So, and I envy you because, as you know, the dad bod is the new trend. It's no longer cool to be skinny with abs. You want to have the dad bod. So, congratulations to you, Jordan, on many fronts for achieving that finally. All right. So, when it comes to everything we're going to dive into, I want to take a look at number one today, college sports. If everyone kind of sits back and takes a look at where we are with college sports, does everyone truly realize how drastically they have changed in the last couple of months? And it's just been the last couple of months. There's been a lot of talk about things coming down the line of things that are going to change, but then they actually get here, and all of a sudden, the whole landscape of what college sports was and now what it is has been completely reversed in a lot of different ways. We have seen no caps on educational benefits, right? That was a big ruling right there. Supreme Court ruling 9-0 in favor of student athletes to make sure that passed for the future. And then on top of that, you had the transfer rule that we also talked about, where players can get that one-time transfer. You kind of had some of that going on with COVID anyways, but then they implement that into college athletics. And then, of course, the big hitter just the other day, 4 or 5 days ago to be in fact, NIL officially comes into play and is now the biggest story around sports and college athletics. But if you look at all of that at the same scope of things, everything has shifted in just a major way. And I think this is going to be one of those times everybody looks back and says, wow, about May, June, July 2020, things started really ramping up for college sports. And a big issue that I think we're going to start seeing, and you can call it an issue, you can call it just part of the change that comes with college sports, is some of these older coaches and some of these well-known coaches in college sports are going to eventually fizzle out. And that does happen when the times change. But when you have all of this added, extras on top of it and the ways that we've never seen it, these old school coaches aren't designed to survive in this landscape. This is, and for a lot of different ways, you have it as a young coach's game where they can go out and recruit. You want guys to be able to actively be a part of social media, for instance. You want guys to connect even more with the players. Now, whether that is all the best way to get the most out of your team, that can certainly be debated. But this is kind of where we are, and that's why we've seen, for instance, in college basketball recently, obviously with Coach K announcing that this will be his final year of coaching. Roy Williams had already decided to retire back on April 1st of this year, and I think that later down the line we're about to see more when it comes to, you're talking to some years down the line, but obviously Coach Calipari is going to be one that can be on his way pretty much whenever. The same thing goes for I think a guy like Bob Huggins. You've got guys that are obviously all over Power 5 schools that have been around for a long time, questioning probably right now, okay, am I going to be able to adapt and adjust with this thing? And I'm telling you right now, you take a look at what Roy Williams and Coach K had, and they said to themselves, not only does this make sense to retire as far as everything that we've accomplished in our respective sport, but on top of that, let's throw in the mix of all these changes that are going to be forced down our throat. We can do as much as we possibly can in terms of coaching the way we want to coach, in terms of making sure that our teams play the way we want to play. But eventually, something's going to happen, and we kind of saw it a little bit already with both those teams, where players are going to get upset. They're going to get into the transfer portal. On top of that, you're going to have some players, that these blue bloods, that are upset about the lack potentially for some of them on name, image, and likeness compared to others. What are you going to be able to set aside as far as packages for some of these benefits, for some of these education related for some of these guys? I mean, all of that played into it. And then on top of it, you look at what these old coaches used to do in their style of coaching, and how strongly worded some of these guys were, how in your face some of these guys were. That part of the game is also starting to trickle away. And that's why, when I said not too long ago, I think the NCAA, if you look at it, especially in basketball, is okay with seeing this happen. They're ready to usher in the sort of new era of coaches. Why? Because the new era of college sports is also here, and you would like a smooth transition, if at all possible. So when you see guys like Roy Williams, like Coach K, and of course you look at college football, you can name a bunch of different guys too, that eventually this is going to help weed out. And in a way, the NCAA is going to say, you know what, man, these guys were good for ratings. Clearly, they were good for the schools. They were good for getting big-time athletes, but this is a new time in college sports. It's a younger game. There's a lot of changes, and some of these guys, and especially the most successful ones that have been around for years and years and years, that's the other thing. You look at some of these guys that have been around in college sports and coaching, it's unbelievable when you actually take a look at how long they've been involved. And can you imagine, like, we're sitting here thinking about the changes that are taking place right now in college sports, and it's wild because the shifts are really, really incredible and significant. Can you imagine what they're thinking? The way that they've gone about things for the last X number of years, and now all of a sudden, this all comes down the line. And you'll either adapt with it, or you'll find something else to do. You'll retire, you'll move on, you'll maybe go to the NBA, you'll maybe go to the NFL, whatever it is. But this is something that I think the NCAA is looking at and saying, if this has to be the transition, fine. But we're going to see some of these well-known names eventually here down the line in a few years find their way out, just like we saw the two of the best college basketball coaches do. We've heard a lot of talk about down the line, for instance, later on after someone like Nick Saban is gone, who's going to be able to take over that program with everything new going on in college football, who's going to be able to take over some of these blue bloods, and will it be something that the blue bloods come back and they're immediately still in the mix of things? Will it be a transition period for some of these squads? Will we see younger, and will we see different names pop up with teams that they can come out and make a run at things? I think it's going to be a lot of shifting. So yes, it is obviously on the outside with name, image, and likeness. It is with the no caps on educational benefits, and it is with the transfer rule. But inside, you look at everything else internally that's going to change here with coaches, with cultures at schools. That's also a part of it that if you look at it from a different angle, you're about to understand is also here. Jordan, am I on here with this? Am I looking at the college coaches in general? Are we going to see a bunch of these older, wiser, well-seasoned coaches with big-time names eventually find their way out, and maybe they won't admit that, hey, all this played into it. But I think we'd all be a little naive to think that these massive changes didn't have a little bit to do with some changes in coaching, especially in college football and college basketball.
No, I agree. I think there's changes, even in the athletic administration part of it too. I think there could be some changes going on. As far as, after a couple of years, will some administrators say, maybe I don't want it, I like the idea. We were a business, but maybe not as much of a business, dealing with agents and things like that as you are now. But I had this conversation over the weekend with some people, even some former players and such. And, it's so interesting to me when I look at it because, I read a story about the guy from Marshall, who is a artist. He likes to go out and play music, and he can't book a gig at a bar for $500 and go play for a night because of the NCAA rules. And you're like, man, that is just crazy. You can't do that. And then you read another story about somebody making money just off their name, or, eventually they're going to be given a car, maybe as a freshman coming in to a program. You just kind of wonder, what is that? And it gets me thinking about the NCAA overall, and kind of, I wish somebody would do, and ESPN does some good documentaries with 30 for 30, and there's some other people out there, and I don't have the wherewithal or the equipment to do it, but I would love to see a documentary on the NCAA because I'm fascinated from the inception of the NCAA, which was during the Teddy Roosevelt administration, where I think 12 athletes died playing football at that time. And this is back before they had helmets and everything. So Teddy Roosevelt and others said, hey, you have to create this to protect the players. We can't have this happening with all of them dying. And then it progressed, and it became about, fair play. So other teams wouldn't get a competitive advantage. And then you have the Supreme Court case with the Board of Regents of Oklahoma versus the NCAA, which the Supreme Court ruled that the cap that the NCAA had at that time, you could only televise 6 ball games a year nationally, and the NCAA lost that case, and they said no, as Clayton and antitrust, which to me, that was the point in 1984 where the Supreme Court kind of said that college athletic programs were a business, because I don't think if they weren't a business, they couldn't have been violated. The NCAA wouldn't have been violating antitrust laws all of a sudden. And now you've progressed, and I'm a little surprised that the NCAA has been able to hang on as long as they have. But, of course, the fairness part of it is what they're probably the most concerned about. Hey, how do we keep these people from having competitive advantages and over the whole scope of all schools that are part of the NCAA? Well, there's still a little bit of that's involved. There'll still be some stuff the NCAA does, but that is eroded as we have now got to this point of players' rights. And, now you have name, image, and likeness. But what's the next thing? This is, like you said, drastic change, maybe the most drastic change since the 80s and that OU case that went before the Supreme Court. So now I'm starting to think, as everything's speeding up, what's the next drastic change? Will we see players try to unionize once again? Will we see a university say, hey, we're going to start paying our players $25 an hour? Like, I just don't know where it's going to go from here. Now, the important thing to remember is the NCAA's done this, and it's temporary, right? Because a lot of states are passing stuff. There is federal legislation that's going to be coming down with this. They're crafting the bills, trying to get everything going now. We know how long that can take because neither side can agree on anything. If one says the sky is blue, the other one's going to say the sky is red on the given day, and then change it on another day and argue the other way around. So you're still going to have that federal legislation is going to come up, and that'll be a big debate. And ultimately, the federal legislation will be what takes hold. So I think the NCAA was put in a place where they had to do this. And once again, it goes to the fairness part of it, right? All these states are saying, okay, we're going to pass this. This is going to be in effect. Well, if the NCAA says, no, you can't do that, well, is that actually going to be fair all across the board? So I think that maybe they had to do this. They were forced to do this by what the states were doing. But this federal legislation, that's the thing now to watch, because I do think there'll be some attempt to kind of draw some things back just a little bit. But it is crazy, and we welcome. We talked about this last week. We welcomed Chad Weiberg in as the new athletic director. There, to me, as far as you look at it, now Oklahoma State has had its fair share of tragedies, but I'm talking about the overall college athletic landscape. It may be one of the most difficult and most tumultuous times to try to navigate that athletic administrations have ever had, based on everything that's coming up going forward and the fact that we don't know exactly what could be happening next.
Yeah, no, I think that's also a good point. College administration positions too have a lot more to deal with. There's a lot more on their plate, and it's going to lead to some either adapting or some heading out, which I think we're going to see a little bit more of. You do want that that coach that comes in now. It's like, I'm all for name, image, and likeness. I like this. Let's make sure our players are taken care of. That's what you want to hear. You're not going to hear any more of this. Wow, hey, let's make sure that we're doing this and this and this, and then we'll worry about name, image, and likeness. That's going to be what some schools don't want to hear anymore.
Well,
and whether that's going to be an unfortunate part of the unfortunate side effect of all this, then so be it. But I think that's kind of where we're at.
And I think even if a coach doesn't agree with it totally, they're not going to say that now, right? I mean, the private conversation at home may
Probably
be a little
not
bit
as vocal, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Mike Boynton, I think, had some comments recently, and I thought what he had to say was good on it. And that whole dynamic of a coach, I mean, all right, you bring a kid in, how do you recruit? I mean, that's kind of what I look at as far as you look at the recruiting side of it. Okay, I'm going to bring you in. You want to recruit that kid. You're not longer you're saying, I'm going to do this. We're going to get you in this. We're going to do that as far as the school's concerned. Now are you going to say, hey, come to our school. We have this ability to have more endorsement deals. Now, if you're in a big city, for instance, there's going to be a lot more chances to get endorsement deals, right, on a local level. So you have this whole idea of, okay, endorsement deals. What are we going to – is that going to be part of your recruiting pitch? And then let's say a company, a kid doesn't have an agent, or maybe they have an agent, and they come to their coach for advice, and the kid's like, okay, I have this company wanting to pay me $50,000 if I do this for them. And maybe the coach says, have you read the fine print? Maybe not a good idea. Well, does that kid say, well, that's some good advice? Or is that kid mad? Well, that coach doesn't want me to make money. Like, there's so many layers to this, and I think that's what maybe people don't understand. One of the biggest misconceptions we have, and what we're finding out right away, right, is the effect on women's sports. Because we all talked about, there's only a few of these athletes that are going to be national endorsement deals, a few of these, men's athletes. Well, what we're finding out is there's a lot of the female athletes out there that have huge followings on TikTok, on Twitter, on other social media, and we're seeing a lot of those ladies ink some deals. And it may be more important for women's sports than men's, because men have an ability to go pro and capitalize off their name farther on. A lot of women, the college is about the best there is. I mean, you have maybe the Olympics and things like that come along every 4 years, but for a lot of women's sports, their best time to capitalize on their name may be during their college careers. So I don't know if some people have even thought about that aspect of it as much. So I'm fascinated by it all. I'm really interested to see where it's going, and I think it's going to be, it is a new, crazy world out there for sure.
It really, really is. And Aaron Torres will join us in the noon hour, and we'll dive into a little bit more what he has to say about that from a different angle. I can't wait to see what he has to say about the recruiting, because that's also a big part of all this. Real quick, let's hit the phone lines before we go to a break. Caller, you're on the Robert Allen and Friends show. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Hey, I had a couple questions. Who's going to put the rules in place for all this? Is it the conferences?
The NCAA has put down interim rules right now, but conferences will have the ability, I believe, to basically put their own guidelines in place as far as what you can and can't do fine print wise. So yeah, they will have some say, but again, a lot of this is also going to come down from federal legislation, like Jordan said there a minute ago, which we're kind of still waiting on right now. That's why the NCAA was kind of forced to pass these interim rules at the moment. But the conference, I believe, will still have some say as far as a little bit of regulation. How far that actually ultimately goes still remains to be seen.
And let me break in on that. All right, and I brought this up last week, all right, and I know Casey and Steve were talking about this too, and they kind of brought it in with some of the stuff going on in college. The marijuana in Oklahoma, it was forced upon with a state vote, and then all of a sudden it's like we have no regulation, and then the legislators are having to kind of work backwards in a way to figure out how are we going to regulate this. And we're seeing a lot of land bought up, sometimes maybe by some foreign entities and such. We're seeing a lot of that going on, and now you're having to work yourself backwards. So I think, for me, looking at it, I think you're going to see a lot of temporary things, caller, that, just trying to kind of piecemeal everything together that you can until the federal legislation comes down, because once the federal legislation comes down, that will trump everything else in place, and then everybody will have to kind of take place from that. But as I mentioned, when it comes to federal legislation, it's hard to get both sides together to get anything done. So I don't know. That could be 6 months from now. That could be 10 years from now. We just don't know. And until you see that, the NCAA can't really do anything that's permanent.
Well, the way I was looking at it, I think it's just a Pandora's box. I really do. I think it's going to kill everything. I mean, I really do. Why not just make them pro? I mean, pretty much. I mean, they are getting the scholarship, and it's going to create super conferences, I think, faster, because these conferences, I mean, SEC's, they're rolling in money, and they have the fan support. I just don't see how this is going to be good for, middle of the road, people like, maybe us or, a little better, because you're going to have to come up with serious money and serious donor cash for all this stuff. I mean,
right.
What's to prevent, from, a player doing a car appearance and getting $25,000 for an appearance?
Well, there's some universities had no trouble giving cars out even before.
Now it's just legal. So now, every dealership's going to have somebody, and they're going to get over, and, what's to prevent everybody, getting overpaid? How are you going to regulate, how much you get per appearance or whatever fee or whatever? It's just, it's just, I don't know how long, like you were talking about with Krzyzewski and Williams and everybody. I mean, I just think it's going to drive all the established coaches out of it. I mean, because it's just going to be a nightmare. I think that.
Well, it's a lot to navigate. I mean, plain and simple, it just really is. So there's going to be a big time learning curve for some of these guys, and if they don't have that learning curve down, then they just won't do it. I think that at this point they're like, this isn't the college sports that I knew, so I'll find something else. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see a little bit more of. And of course, this is a situation with NIL and much more where the rich could get richer on this. I mean, plain and simple. But occasionally you're going to have some of these schools, especially until there's federal legislation, pull some of these other guys away. But until you are actually allowed to legally pay a player cash to come and play a sport, say, hey, that performance on the field right there, awesome, here's your payday for that. Until that happens, you're going to find a way to sort of manipulate what the word amateurism can actually mean, and that's kind of where we are right now. But I'm with you, caller. I said a long time ago, super conferences were on the way at some point too. That was inevitable.
Hey.
Maybe this did speed up the process, so it's going to be a big time learning curve. We're going to have a ton of different storylines and angles to all this as it progresses. But yeah, it's a big shift, no doubt.
And
that's kind of the whole.
I can't wait on that new recruit that signs, and once they get to campus, they're driving that $35,000-$40,000 Silverado around, and then after a year, they decide to transfer with the new truck off their endorsement deal.
The way I was thinking about it is, and let's stay close to home, but how about if, when Cuba had his 2,000 yard season, and then, he gets all the endorsements and everything else after that, and then LD Brown comes in and plays like he did last year, and he's just like, what about me over here? Just 2 or 3 games.
Yeah,
it's going to.
When the third string defensive back who has 50,000 followers because he does something extra, it makes a big endorsement deal, and the other guy who's actually maybe a all-conference guy. He only has 1,500 followers because he's not active on social media, is not making any money. Like, yeah, what do you do as a coach?
Right.
And that's part of
I
coaching.
mean,
how do we balance
I-
out the locker room with that situation? That's exactly right. So I think that's another thing that mixes in with it.
Right, exactly. So, all right, guys, have a good day.
Thanks, appreciate the phone call. Yeah, no, there's a lot of different, obviously, there. The caller brought them up, too. You can go from point A to point Z to point Z point 1,000 with all of it.
Hey, Patrick.
It's everywhere.
See, you and I are the age, and most people older will probably know, too, because they probably had kids that watch Shrek. And you remember when he goes, it's an onion. It's got a lot of layers, and
Yeah.
And then Eddie Murphy, who plays the donkey, he goes, why can't I be a cake? We're not dealing with a cake here. We're dealing with an onion. There's a whole lot of layers. Now, to each their own as far as the eye of the beholder, right? Administrations, coaches, they're looking at it as like an onion, but these players are looking at it as a cake with a chance to make a lot of tasty opportunities.
Big time. That's a great way to put it. We'll leave it there, too, because that is a great way to put it. We come back here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show. We'll dive into 3 big headlines of the day. Don't forget, later on, Tom Dorado will join the 12 o'clock hour. Aaron Torres will hop on with us, and we'll dive into much, much more in the world of college sports and beyond. All still to come here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler back with you as we should have the connection set now, ready to go. We're taking a look at 3 different headlines here for the day in the world of sports, and we started with the recruiting class headline out of Heartland College Sports. And we were just diving into some of the looks that I think that Oklahoma State football specifically is getting more on a national landscape, which I think they deserve with everything going on as far as in their 2021 class, guys committing to the 2022 class. As we mentioned, you flip a guy like Talon Shetron from Oklahoma that's going to get a lot of different heads to turn this way too. And you've got Mike Gundy and the staff that are really starting to realize, hey, look, it's time to get some of these bigger guys over here to Oklahoma State, especially with, I think, the expanded playoff coming down the line. This is going to be a team that has to be thinking they're going to have a chance to be in the mix, as a lot of others do too. So they're preparing now, getting ready for guys that are coming in to help change the program a bit and then keep it consistent with its winning ways. So that's your first headline there. From Heartland Sports. They always do a really good job covering college football. This next one I want to take a look at comes from Our Daily Bears, which is a publication that covers the Baylor Bears, and they were taking a look at the Big 12 as far as football and a bunch of different quick snippets. And this is something that they had to say, where they had their strengths and weaknesses for Oklahoma State. The strength they immediately threw over to the defense. The headline, by the way, comes from Field of Dreams. 2021 football opponent, quick hitter, Oklahoma State. They said that the strength is linebacker. Oklahoma State returning their leading tackler, linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez, and Devin Harper, who will likely start alongside Rodriguez. Even though Harper only started 1 game last season, he's still ranked 6th for tackles for the Cowboys. And surprisingly for a Gundy team, I think the defense will be more exciting than the offense this season, is what they throw out there for the Baylor Bears publication. I have to tell you this, when you look at the defense overall, it's easy to always get caught up, the defensive line, and even in the secondary. But I'm telling you, I think with Oklahoma State, it starts in the middle of that defense, especially with a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez. People sometimes tend to undervalue that position, especially when it comes to leadership. But I'm telling you, Malcolm Rodriguez brings a lot to the table in terms of leadership for this football team and a defense that could absolutely anchor this entire squad this year. I'm not saying that it's going to take a long time for this little bit of a new look offense as far as players to get their feet underneath them, but there will be a bit of an adjustment, as there always is. The good news is you have Spencer Sanders, who knows the playbook extremely well. You've got a lot of younger guys that are going to have a chance to make a name for themselves. You've got some experience returning, but we don't have that safety net as we talk about with Tylan Wallace or even in a way Chuba Hubbard. However, we did see last year that he's someone that you can slide a couple of other guys in with that depth at running back and still find success. So I think they're spot on with the strength with Malcolm Rodriguez. Devin Harper, I mentioned, I think is going to have a huge role. You look at last year, you had Malcolm, you had Amos. They were 2 of the best when it comes to overall, tandems of linebackers in the college football world. I thought that they were always a little bit underlooked because of how successful they were as tacklers, how good they were to getting the football and reading plays real quick. Then they go down and they go to strength, and then they go straight to the weak. and they say running back is the weakness for Oklahoma State. It says similar to Iowa State, Oklahoma State doesn't really have a a glaringly bad position group. That said, the Cowboys lost an exceptionally talented running back in Chuba Hubbard. They will try to replace his production with returning running backs Desmond Jackson and L.D. Brown. Both had solid seasons last year. They also added transfer Jalen Warren. I don't agree. I don't agree with the weakness. You look at running back, and I would say that, and maybe if your other schools looking on the outside in, you think to yourself, wow, Chuba Hubbard's not there. There's no way they're going to be able to replace that. Okay, well, if you paid attention at all last year, you did see that, yes, obviously Chuba was not having the season a lot of people expected. Different reasons for that, including injuries. But his replacements in terms of L.D. Brown and Des Jackson and Dom Richardson, I mean, you had guys that stepped up big time. And you add Jalen Warren, I think the depth just got even more, glaring this season for Oklahoma State. So I wouldn't call it a weakness. I would call it something that you're able to plug a lot of different guys in, go with a potential 2-3-headed monster before it's all said and done. And yes, it looks like a giant hole with no Chuba Hubbard. But again, if he had a season like 2019 last year, then maybe I'd agree with that. But he didn't. And these guys proved themselves. And I think LT is going to be obviously the anchor to this running back group and have a chance to really take this team where they want to go, especially running the football and setting up the rest of their offense doing that. They give a way too early prediction. Baylor got absolutely boat raced by the Cowboys last year. However, that game came at the end of a disappointing 2020 campaign. Look, they can try to spin that however they want. I mean, Baylor obviously they didn't even show up at that game. It was pretty embarrassing, I would have to think, for the Bears overall. I suspect this year's game will be nothing like that one. The article continues. In fact, I think both Baylor and Oklahoma's strengths will lie with their defense. So the question will be which team's offense can get some traction. A lot of Oklahoma State's hopes hinge on quarterback Spencer Sanders. However, there was so much offensive production, only one starting wide receiver running back returns. That's why I think Baylor's high ceiling for improvement will pay off even on the road, and Baylor wins 20-17. Only saying that the Cowboys will score 17 points against the Baylor Bears. I think that's certainly in the category of a way too early prediction right there when that game does roll around. But there is, I think it does kind of let us into a lot of the outlook for some of these other schools and other teams that aren't familiar with Oklahoma State. They take a look and they say, well, it's just like we mentioned. Offensive weapon-wise, there's no Tylan Wallace, there's no Chuba Hubbard. They're really going to struggle. And I don't expect that to be the case overall for the rest of the season. Again, there's going to be a learning curve for some of these younger wide receivers. But it's not like you're just going to completely fall apart without those guys. The coaching staff's too good to let that happen. There's going to be adjustments that are being made right now in the offseason. But there you go. The Baylor hopefuls over there at our Daily Bears. We're thinking that Oklahoma State's only going to manage 17 points against this upcoming season. This final headline.
Hey, Patrick, real quick on that for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is wishful thinking, I think. And maybe it comes to fruition. We don't have a crystal ball. But I think with the headline, you're talking about the running backs. I don't know if I would just single out a group. I think you single out the offense as a whole because I think that when you lose Chuba, you lose Tylan, and Spencer has kind of been an unknown, right, as far as consistency is concerned. I don't know if you can single out one group, and you add the offensive line who's been inconsistent for years, and you hope that they're going to get that. I think that you can't really single out the running backs. You can't really single out any position, but you can say – we just don't know what's going to happen because the Oklahoma State offense just hasn't had everything firing on all cylinders in quite some time.
No, I completely agree. That's why when I saw that was listed as the weakness was that group, I think it's more of you're not exactly sure what to expect, especially if you're not covering Oklahoma State, and that happens to be the case there, of course, with the entire offense, like you mentioned. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that early to see how they do gel. But, yeah, no, I completely agree with that, too. The last one, this, of course, was one of the biggest stories over the weekend, really heading into the 4th of July weekend. This comes from Outkick.com. Sha'Carri Richardson banned from Olympics for not doing anything resembling cheating. So what does that mean? Of course, if you hadn't heard of Sha'Carri Richardson, you probably have by now. She was disqualified from the Olympic 100-meter race after testing positive for cannabis, for weed. And she went on to admit that she said in her tweet that she was human. She did smoke weed that helped her cope with the recent death of her grandmother. So she was banned from competing in that Olympic 100-meter race. And there's a couple things that come to mind here. I mean, first of all, is it ridiculous that this is the ruling? Yes, I think so. I think it's a stupid rule, plain and simple. No, weed in no way enhances a performance like steroids do. And if we're going to talk about a bunch of different substances and what can be used and things like that, shouldn't we really focus on if this substance is going to enhance this certain athlete's performance? I think that should be the main thing, especially when you look at how the cannabis is accepted around the country mostly anymore too. It just seems like that is completely out of date. She did nothing in terms of, again, helping her be the better runner. I mean, unless there's something that the cannabis magically has done over the last week that's going to just make you the best runner in the 100 meters or whatever it is there, the 100-meter race, and let me know.
Most people I know, they can't get off their couch when they smoke it, so.
That's exactly. I would think it'd be the opposite. You wouldn't want to run a 100-meter race. So I think that's obviously really stupid. But the other part of it too is, look, she should have known better. I don't think it's out of bounds to say that she should have known better in this situation. Like, sorry, but it's true. She was talking about, hey, she was in a lot of pain. She was dealing with a lot of emotional pain. She was triggered by blind emotions. She said sadness and hurting and all of that. And I get it. You want to find a way to cope with that, and maybe she thought that was the best way. But if you have a chance to be in the Olympics, and you do know that cannabis is something that could potentially get you disqualified if it's found, then you got to find it in a different way.
Yeah, and
that's how I see it.
Yeah, and Patrick, on that, a rule is a rule, so you got to be smart about that. So I understand, and this isn't like, the NCAA ruling. This is like an Olympic committee rule. So I mean, it's bigger than that. But if I read right, it's a month, so she won't be able to compete in, or however the ban is. She may not be able to compete in the individual, but she can still maybe compete in the relay based on the ban. Did I read that correctly?
I think that is what I saw as well. Yeah, so it would just be her.
Would she want to do that though?
Race.
Yeah, would she want to do that though? That's the question.
Yeah.
You work for the 100-meter. The relay's great, but a gold medal's a gold medal. So, I don't know if she's made an announcement that she would compete in the relays if that's available. But it does make. I tell you, that would be a huge storyline if she had to miss that race, but then got to compete in the relays.
Yeah, that would be pretty wild. I think more people would be like, well, what do you mean? You're telling me she tested positive for cannabis?
The weed's completely out of her system after a month. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of the most outdated things I've seen, clearly, and I get it. Like you said, it is a rule. That's why I'm saying she has to know better at that point. I would think that there's different ways to find a way to cope, and eventually, if you wanted that to be a part of it, fine, make it somewhat down the line. But this was a situation that I think, and you saw a lot of, big-time athletes that came out and basically said the same thing, like, this is ridiculous, let her run. And I understand that, too. I think that we, allow a lot of things right now in college sports, the Olympics, I should say, and college sports now, too. But we allow a lot of things in the sports world to slide, and yet we can't let Sha'Carri Richardson run her Olympic race because she smoked a little weed. I mean, it's one of the most ridiculous things I think I've heard in a long time. So I feel for Sha'Carri. I hope things turn around. And something tells me that she will find a way to benefit from this one way or the other, whether it comes to different endorsements or things like that, prominence in the social media and athletic world. But still, terrible news for Sha'Carri Richardson, who is not allowed to race in that 100 meters. So there's your three big headlines.
And Patrick, last thing on Richardson, she'll only have to wait 3 years till she gets another shot at the Olympics. So I got a feeling we'll be hearing her name again.
Oh, absolutely, and how talented she is. If you look at what she's done with some of her races before, and she won that 100 Olympic trials back on June 19th, whenever this was going down. So she clearly was going to be a real competitor. So I'm with you, dude. This won't be the last year.
And maybe, who knows, in 3 years she could smoke a joint right before she races.
That's exactly right. So, in 3 years, things could change in a way where they might be selling it at the concession stands at the Olympics.
They may. Somebody may be like, Namath back there when he's smoking the cigarettes right before he goes on the field, right? I mean, who knows 3 years from now.
Hey, how poetic justice would that be? She gets the classic, the photo of her sitting there with the joint, like, yeah, I'm about to go run. How about that? Yeah, that'd be a nice little slap.
It still torches everybody.
Yeah, it does. When we come back here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Tom Dorado's going to be on with us, as he always is on Tuesdays, and we'll dive into a lot with him. There's a couple of new hires at Oklahoma State we'll get his take on. OSU basketball has a new opponent coming up this year that we had kind of previewed might be something that would happen, and it did, so we'll get into that too. And I'm sure we'll dive into a bunch of Major League Baseball stuff and much, much more. Coming up, Tom Dorado will join us here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Yeah, we're back here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show today on this Tuesday, live from Stillwater Milling Agri Center, 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. You can come in right now and check out all of their different conditioning supplements they have right now. Is selling a lot of dirt bite. It's a flaxseed meal-based multi-species nutritional supplement that's designed to enhance the overall appearance and condition of livestock, horses, and pets. It will give your horses, cattle, farm animals, and poultry and swine a show championship appearance. It also helps the nutrition and appearance for your dogs and cats. You want your animals to look their best, we'll come on in. That's one of the many things Stillwater Milling Agri Center can help you with. They've had a lot of people coming in and grabbing a lot of things for their summer gardens and flower beds and all of that too. 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. In this 11 o'clock hour on the Robert Allen and Friends Show, I believe Tom Dorado is with us, and he's going to dive into a lot with me too. Tommy D, what's happening?
Well, how are you? I haven't talked to you in a while. I bet in the last couple of days, at least the last day, you have become one of the biggest Met fans going around because, it was a good combination for you yesterday, and Mets beat the Brewers, and they got two more with the Brewers, and you're looking like maybe the Cardinals can get back to within 7 after the Wednesday rolls around.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, you're right, first of all, about the Mets situation. But yesterday was like the 10th time this season the Cardinals have gone into the 6th or 7th inning without a hit.
How could they do that with that lineup? I ask you that every time I see you.
I know. It's unbelievable. And finally, they were going against Gosman out of San Francisco, and he's had a great year. He's an all-star.
Mm-hmm.
But he was no-hitting them through 7 innings. And finally, Nolan Arenado bloops one out there, and they get a hit and all this, and then they just kind of added some runs at the end there and were able to get it done. But I'm telling you, it's been unbelievable the amount of times this season where, and I'm like you, I'm like, how? Look at these names. How in the world are you not able to find yourself a base hit? And it's become a situation where you're like, hey, they got a base hit, so let's cheer for that. That's a win. Even though we're down by 5 on the scoreboard, that's a win right there. It's really just, it's been back and forth. You can deal with the injuries, but yes, Tom, it has been, as you know, a tumultuous first half to the season. However, I do appreciate your Mets helping us out a little bit. That's the least they could do.
They got DeGrom going tonight, so that's probably against a former Stillwaterite and Brett Anderson, who has made his way to the Milwaukee Braves. How about the Milwaukee Brewers? And it shows you have a long eye. I can remember Milwaukee. But Brett's going to be going against DeGrom tonight. It's a chore for sure, but he's coming off the IL for the umpteenth time. Brett is. So I'll be a little divided tonight, but not that divided. Another loss, Brett. I'm sorry, but we need to have that happen. But you got a chance there. Now you have to do your own work. And let me throw this in too before I forget. You mentioned All-Stars. This guy's been on the show a number of times, basically every year. Brian Jones, who's son of his dad, Scott Jones. That's the way I always look at it. His dad's riding his son's coattails there. But Brian's a long time. I think he's in his 20th year as the video coordinator at the Rockies. We're going to have him on tomorrow, not necessarily to talk about the Rockies, but to talk about what the All-Star game and all the activities, which is a week from today, will entail on his end. What are they responsible for as the hosts? Because it's a week from tonight, and keep in mind, they didn't have a whole year to plan for this. I don't know when they were in line for it, Patrick. You might know, but it wasn't this year. And when they took it out of Atlanta, they ended up in Denver. So we're going to get a little bit of behind-the-curtain thing with Brian tomorrow, and where are they now at 5?
There you go. Yeah, that'll be good to hear what he's had to deal with. Like you said, a little bit more interesting aspect for him because of the All-Star game and everything going on. And, last minute out of all things, too, when that was changed. So that'll be good stuff. You can hear that at 5 o'clock after the afternoon sports drive tomorrow. Tom will have him on. And that'll be good stuff. Tom, with Jacob deGrom going tonight, you think that Major League Baseball, since they're doing the whole sticky stuff rule, Since DeGrom's so good, should they make it to where it's the DeGrom rule special and they just after every inning they check him instead of just the first inning?
He has proved mortal the last 2 starts. Where he's actually given up a run or two, and had to deal with runners on base. But I find it laughable if you watch enough baseball like I do from time to time on MLB. That pitchers coming in have to show the hat. It's almost like after they come off the field after an inning, they got to show the hat. And let me tell you, it's almost like the umpires are going, "All right, come here, let me look at your hat, let me in." And you could tell the body language of the umpires is like, "Do we really have to do this crap?" And there's nothing in the hat, there's nothing on the bill, there's nothing on your hat. Okay, here, take your hat and get out of here. I mean, that shows you how ludicrous this is.
No, it really does. You can see that with all the umpires. They're just like, I hate to be here, man. I'm sorry, I got to do this. My hands are tied. Let me look. All right, maybe since I'm so annoyed by this, I might not look as strongly as it should. But I'll go ahead and make it for the camera. Okay, we're good. Move on.
But I'm going to throw this out to you. It is coincidental that, and I watched them this week, but since all this came about and he didn't offer up a yes or a no, Garrett Cole hadn't been near as good. And
no,
his numbers are more than mortal. And the Mets got after him this weekend in the Subway Series. Now, you can draw whatever conclusions you want, but since the checks, if you will, since the searches, if you will, have started, he hadn't been near as good.
No, Tom. He's the situation. I think, especially him. And he may be the poster boy for that. It clearly was overusing the sticky stuff. I mean, he admitted it basically. When they asked him. We played that classic soundbite back in the afternoon sports drive that day, where he had nothing to say about it. Couldn't come up with an actual answer. And then they've actually dove in and, of course, taken a look at the difference of the spin rate with his ball. And it's just unbelievable, the drop-off. So, and I threw that out was, I wonder how long really he had been using it. Because Garrett Cole's been good for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how long has he been using that stuff to make his control better, to make his grip better, his spin rate and all that? Just makes you wonder. And he can't come out and say, no, you know what, that's not the reason. I've just not been good. No, we all know what happened. So I think you're right. It's a really glaring and unique situation, and Garrett Cole is going to either have to adapt or die with this thing because I think it's, at least for now, it's here to stay. We're going to dive into a lot of Major League Baseball stuff coming up here in the rest of the hour. But first, Tom, I want to take a look, as I'm sure you are well aware, and you kind of mentioned a little bit about this to me a week ago or so. But Oklahoma State baseball adding Justin Seeley to the coaching staff as an assistant coach. Comes off 12 seasons over there at Texas A&M, where he was the recruiting director, and looks like he's going to do that too for Oklahoma State. But what do you think about the hire for Seeley? Obviously, he was part of a bunch of NCAA regional appearances with the Aggies too. They were in the College World Series twice while he was there, so he has seen a lot of success in college baseball.
Well, yeah, his resume would say that. Again, he became available because when Schlossnagle left TCU, went to A&M, he didn't keep any of the staff at A&M. So Seeley became available, obviously, and Holliday picked him up and basically will put him in the same role that Marty Lee's had in terms of recruiting and doing the things that he does. We just had this conversation, Casey and I, on the TV side. When coaches are hired, no matter what the sport, and sometimes administrators, those resumes, you kind of look at them and take them with a grain of salt. I mean, how much did you have to do with the success of a team? Obviously, you must have had some, right, if you're a member of the staff. But how much really did you have? Did you really nurture, 6 NBA players? I mean, you see all the time, right?
Yeah.
And these are good. I mean, these are things that go in a resume, right? And you had to have something to do with it. We were talking about Sigmund, to be honest with you, the new deputy athletic director here that was named last week. You look at that resume. I mean, it is, without a doubt, Patrick, that is the most glowing, amplified resume I have ever seen anybody have coming to Oklahoma State, coach or administrator. You
For
could,
sure.
you may disagree on that, but I mean, you going from Super Bowls to NCAA Final Fours to financial here and I'm not saying he's not that, but holy cow! I mean, that is a glowing resume, and I'll be interested in seeing what he's like when he gets here, because that's a very key spot here that Chad hired and filled.
No, I'm with you too. Yeah, obviously that resume is extremely impressive. I actually couldn't believe it when I was reading it that first time. Whenever you were actually on with me, last week, I was like, wait a minute, what? Am I reading the right thing here? But yeah, that was obviously impressive. It remains to be seen what Sealy will do. But I have to think too, Tom, that as far as OSU baseball, you look at what happened this past year, disappointing ending. But as we've talked about, just with the coaching staff alone, and some of the names that are on that, obviously the Holidays, Ventura, you go down the list of former successful players, coaches, all that stuff. I think, and then you add on the addition of what you can do, over there with the new stadium at O'Brate. You add on to what OSU baseball looks like, at least kind of where they're heading. I would have to think that Sealy might be in a good position here to get some attractive names, at least considering Oklahoma State baseball at this point. I know that there is clearly a lot of competition in the Big 12, but at the same time, his work's probably cut out for him, because we know that with name, image, and likeness, with all this stuff too, that's also going to play a part, I think, in college baseball. We talk a lot about football and basketball. Baseball will have its own hurdles to overcome with that, and maybe the recruiting plays in a little bit there too. And certainly, I think as well as when you look at an Oklahoma State school, for instance, it's like, we all know, football drives the needle, and that is the case for a lot of different schools. So maybe it's not as easy to offer as much as you'd like when it comes to a sport like baseball. But he is in a different environment right now when it comes to helping get some guys over to this squad, and you have to think that he needs to have a little bit of pressure put on him when it comes to adding on, because this team, we know, in the right direction at the right time, can be really dangerous to get some of the guys returning from last season, depending on who decides to go to the draft and things like that. But it is a landscape where Sealy is having to deal with a lot of different things in the new position at Oklahoma State.
And that's where the experience comes in, because he's had the same things to deal with at A&M. And I don't think the draft is just a subtle hurdle, if you will, because you don't know who's leaving your squad, and you don't know what the draft is going to do, despite the fact it's only 20 rounds. I put that in quotes, but that's better than the 5 rounds for these kids than it was a year ago. So you're adding 15 more rounds. I don't know how many picks that is, but it's a bunch. But that also impacts the availability of the guys you signed or will be signing. But that's always been the case, Patrick. I mean, that's something that baseball coaches have to deal with that other coaches don't in any sport. I mean, you don't have to worry about. I guess you could worry about somebody, the greatest high school player in the world, deciding to try his luck, with an NFL team, but it doesn't work that way. Baseball is different, and so Sealy, but he's been down that road, for 17 years or whatever it is. He's with A&M. Sometimes the kids you go after and you already signed, they say, "Well, coach, I was drafted in the 3rd round. I could make X amount of money, so see ya." And then you don't know what's coming back. You don't know how many of the guys you got coming back. So, hey, I'm with you, though, on one count. Excuses are not what this program is made of. It never has been. But you talk about, it's kind of like football. When they got the new stadium and they got all the new stuff in the West End, you can't sit on, well, it's hard to bring people to Stillwater anymore. You've got a stadium here that is second to none. And you can show a recruit when they get here now, because you go face-to-face with people, right? It's not like it was a year ago. So you've got that going for you. Now, Ventura and Matt can't recruit out off the campus, but they can be here when Johnny comes in, and they can meet with him. So you got Josh, you got Robbie, you got now Sealy. So I would think that there's no real excuses for not bringing in high-level talent like we have been used to over the years. And now when you get him here, then it's just a matter of, making it work. And coming off that last year, and I think you're right, it was disappointing, especially the showing in Arizona, which was really disappointing. But nonetheless, that's in the past, and we'll see what kind of a signing class. They already got a couple of guys that probably a borderline go to the draft or come here, and that's always the case in baseball. But I'll be interested in seeing how they kind of bring new guys in on top of maybe who's still around from next year, because you have great stories, and I talked to Ventura about this. I don't know if you heard that last week, but
Yeah.
I thought that Brown was a great story that came out of this year, Marcus Brown, because he had to play because of injuries. They put him in there, and they started him out. I mean, pinch runner, pinch hitter. Then all of a sudden, they put him in the infield for a couple of innings, and he looked good there. And I don't know how many games. I'm looking at the stat sheet. I'd have to see how many games he actually started for us. He started, what is this here? I'm looking at the wrong. He started 16, 17 games, something like that, all down the stretch. Well, I think he was a success story. I think that was one of the positives came out last year, and he's going to be one of the guys that, unless somebody comes in and just bumps him out of there, that you're going to build your infield around.
No, I'm with you too. I think that was one of, and there were a number of them, but yeah, he is something I would throw in that mix as well. And while I have you on here, the other day, whenever Chad Weiber was on with giving his his introduction and all of that, and talked to Casey Schrum, and that was the big deal. But you heard what Chad Weiber had to say, and you kind of told everyone your thoughts on the afternoon sports drive there to round out the week. But real quick, give the Robert Allen Friends audience as well a little bit of what you thought overall with Chad Weiber coming in as the new AD. And kind of making that transition and everything that you heard from him, and what you thought about that on, I think that was Thursday.
Yeah, it was Thursday. You guys were gracious enough to bring me in for 10 minutes or so, and I appreciate that. I think bottom line is what you see is what you get with Chad Weiberg. And I think what you saw and what you heard should be uplifting. Now, let's kind of back up a little bit. Chad was in a situation where it's a comfort zone for him and it's a comfort zone for the coaches in that he was here for 4 years. It wasn't like he was coming in from the University of Maine and nobody knew who he was. And here he is. Now he's got to get to know everybody. He's got to get to know the coaches, got to get to know the staff, and everybody else, the student athletes. I mean, he's got the comfort zone of having been here, number one. But he also has the comfort zone of having been around Oklahoma State almost pretty much all his life, even when he was at K-State, even when he was at Texas Tech. I mean, he still had connections here. So I thought he was, obvious is probably not the word, but I thought he was the guy who should have been. They brought him in 4 years prior to understudy Holder and get his feet wet. He got more than his feet wet for 4 years. I mean, he's up to his knees now, so he knows what's going on. I'm a big Chad Weiberg fan. I have been since he got back here. I was a big Chad Weiberg fan when he was here initially in the alumni, and then he went to K-State and he went to Tech and kind of honed his talents. But he's going to be really good for this program. Now, having said all that, what you say at a press conference, and this is my personal opinion, there was no balloons and band like we usually have from time to time. I mean, it was pretty much straightforward business stuff. And Chad said the right stuff. So did Dr. Schrum. They said exactly, looking ahead, what we need to do. Didn't dodge NIL, didn't dodge portal, didn't dodge any of that stuff. But I do think what you see is what you get with him, and I think you're going to like what you get. But let's be honest. The next day, for all I know, I mean, an AD has issues that they have to deal with all the time that the public has no idea about and probably didn't need to know about, unless it's something of major ilk, and things like contracts and schedules, expansion, facilities. These are ongoing conversations that ADs have all the time, and some turn out well, and some are realistic, and saying maybe we can't do this today. Let's find a way around it tomorrow. And coaches sometimes accept that, sometimes they don't. So I'm not saying there's anything negative, but Chad would be first to tell you that reality sets in when you're sitting in that chair and you're the man. You're not the man till you're the man, and he is the man. But I do have all kinds of faith in Chad being able to handle anything that comes his way.
Yeah, no, I think it's well said, and I think a lot of people are kind of in the same boat too, and feeling good about the changes going on in the administration and sports for Oklahoma State. We come back here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show, an update on Oklahoma State basketball finding another opponent for this upcoming season. And I'll tell you what, Tom and I may have actually done a little bit of prediction with something like this that took place not too long ago, and I think we might have just been spot on. We'll tell you what all of that means. Coming up next on the Robert Allen Friends Show, your Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
I'll catch a flight, go to the moon, lay on the floor of your living room, and talk about the things that make you cry. I'll never walk into another bar. I'll burn these tattoos off my arms. I'll go to hell and back.
Welcome back into the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network, Tuesday edition. Patrick Wheeler with you. Tom Dorado's along with me as well in this 11 o'clock hour, and I'm live at Stillwater Milling Agri Center over here on 502 East 6th Street for tailgating at Boone Pickens this fall and for many summers of cookout barbecuing on your patio. See the Agri Center selection of Green Mountain wood-fired pellet grills. Green Mountain grills feature 8-in-1 versatility on a massive grill space. You can smoke, sear, bake, or roast, grill, slow cook, braise, or barbecue all in one. Wood pellets are also available in 5 true hardwood flavorful blends. I know many of you enjoy grilling. Well, make sure it's a part of your tailgating that will also be back in full swing this year for Oklahoma State football at Boone Pickens Stadium. This is your one-stop shop, Stillwater Milling Agri Center, 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. All right, Tom. So you know what's interesting about this news with Oklahoma State basketball, which is that they've added another non-conference opponent. They will take part in the inaugural Basketball Hall of Fame showcase at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Connecticut. And this is a situation where Oklahoma State will get to play a team that we had previewed might be out of none other than the ACC. And Oklahoma State will take on North Carolina State in this inaugural tournament. They will also face UMass Lowell. Central Connecticut State is another team that will be involved in this as well. That will take place November 16th through the 17th. But if you look at NC State, they're obviously a team that can pose a threat really any time. But bottom line, Tom, I think this is just this is another one of those solid additions to a schedule where you can say, hey, look, we got an ACC team here. If we're able to go in there and squeeze out a win against them, that's going to look good come the end of the season. But I think it's a nice get. And you look at the other two teams. I'll be honest with you, Tom. I don't really think I've heard much of either of those other two teams that are involved. As a lot of people probably are the same way, but nonetheless, you get NC State, and I think we were kind of right on the money when you and I were talking about this not too long ago. That we may see an ACC team, for instance, pop up on the OSU basketball schedule.
Well, I think the location is significant right off the bat. I mean, let's face it, that's the arena where officially Eddie Sutton became a member of the National Basketball Hall of Fame, number one, the Mohegan Sun. That's where the actual, I don't know if it was the actual ceremony, but it was the induction. So there's a little significance there. And let's call it the way it is. When and it's not just at Oklahoma State, but when you look at tournaments, you look at the teams that are in it, and then you figure out, well, can I come out with a couple of wins? And it appears that this would be a no-brainer. You're going to come out with a couple of wins with the other teams that you mentioned, and we take our chances against NC State. Now, NC State was not very good last year. I think they were 14-11, as I remember. So it wasn't a classic NC State team, but generally speaking, they have equivalent type talent. So you think you'd be tested there in this tournament. And NC State brings back some fond memories because that was one of the teams we beat in our way to the Sweet 16 in the early years of Eddie Sutton. I forget what it was, his first year, I guess, and maybe his second year. But we beat him. I don't know. We beat him by 10 or 11, whatever it was, and so there's some tie-ins there as well, and as we get closer to it, all these tie-ins will be brought to the surface. But overall, I mean, yeah, we talked about that early on. It's if you get an ACC team in the win column early in the year, it can help you. Now, we saw what Marquette did, and it really didn't help us last year. Now, that was just go to Marquette, win the tournament.
Right.
But, on paper, it looked like, man, if you could beat Marquette, that's going to be good for you at the end of the year. And Marquette didn't turn out to be worth a damn. So I don't know about NC State enough yet to tell you whether they're going to be a worthy competitor or not. But I will say this, and it's kind of like I say when we schedule teams to come in and play here in any sport. We don't pay these guys to come in and beat us in Stillwater, and we're not going to go out on the road and play somebody that might have a overwhelming chance to beat you. So overall, I'm sure the basketball team feels comfortable with this tournament selection. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so too. Kevin Keats, I think this is his fifth season is what it will be for him with NC State, and he's had a decent little run, 79-47 overall, and he was back in the NCAA tournament in 2018. So it's been a couple of years. Sure, these other teams like you have UMass Lowell out of the America East Conference, and then of course Central Connecticut State, I believe, is the other one I mentioned there. And that's a couple of teams, like you said, Tom. Yeah, you would expect to get some wins there. North Carolina State, I think, is also has to be favorable for OSU too. But down the road, like you come back and you say, hey, remember Oklahoma State this past year? Let's take a look at a couple of good wins. Oh, well, NC State had a decent year, and they beat NC State. There you go. All of a sudden, it's starting to fall into place. But you look at the other non-conference games on the schedule now for the Cowboys, and you get Oral Roberts, that's going to be there, and then you take on Xavier in the Big East Big 12 Challenge. You add Florida in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, and now NC State. This is, I think, Tom, a team, as we talked about with Oklahoma State basketball, where you're certainly going to get your challenges with some of these teams. Obviously you look at them and say, all right, who's going to be decent this year? Is Florida going to be back into it? Is Xavier going to have a chance to get back to where they used to be, for instance? Oral Roberts, we know they were the story last year late in the tournament. Will they pose a threat? So I think you're going to see a lot of different opportunities for a challenge for this squad, and this team has to be up for it, especially for a fan base. You want to see, all right, we talked a lot about how some of these guys going to mesh, what these roles are going to be for some different players. Well, when you look at some of these non-conference teams, and this is obviously we're not even talking about getting into Big 12 play, you add this on top of it, I think you're going to get your opportunity to see exactly what works and what doesn't. But this is a situation for OSU basketball where they can add an ACC squad and say, all right, let's put it to the test, and we'll see if what we have is going to work or not. And maybe that's a good opportunity for especially the fan base to take a look and just find out whether this team is going to gel or it's going to be some bumpy roads ahead.
Well, I think as you look at it in the preseason, it's a developing situation. But I will say this. I mean, I have no clue about Florida. You got to play them on their court. Xavier hadn't been as good in years past as they were in years past. And to be fair, last year, while the non-conference schedule here with the best player in the country, the top draft pick, that non-conference schedule gave us about all we could handle coming in here. I'm speaking of the Oral Roberts, the Wichita States. I'm forgetting a couple others. But this is a veteran team coming back next year that Oklahoma State has. We could point to some of the deficiencies. We don't have a big back-to-the-basket guy. Well, I don't know many college teams have back-to-the-basket guys anymore. McCormick's back to the back at Kansas. I think he's back. But overall, they don't have that. But they've got – I've watched them a couple of times, and, and again, pickup is pickup. If you don't look good in a pickup game, then there's problems because there's no officials and you're not running plays. You're just running up and down the floor to get in condition. But we got a lot of runners and jumpers on this team. And you bring in Smith, you bring in Hunter, and you certainly Bryce Thompson. You add to the athletic runners and jumpers that you got. But you got to be pretty veteran with Anderson and Likely in the backcourt. You got Moncrief, and you certainly got the Boone brothers in there. They can make a difference. And Rondell Walker, who gets lost in the conversation all the time. We don't bring him up enough. Donovan Williams is trying to show that he's coming back from those two knee injuries. And, again, this is pickup stuff. And I don't know where he would fit in, but it does appear that Boynton's got enough guys that, to me, not to mention Bryce Williams, who is back running and jumping like he did a year ago. You got enough talent to win now. I mean, there's no uncertainty with this roster, in my opinion. Now, you can point out here or there, you wish you had this, you wish you had that, but you got more people than you had in 4 years here. So, in my mind, there's no excuse not to win big this year, no matter who you're playing.
Yeah, to kind of elevate that, Tom, what you're saying, you've got, after Kate Cunningham, your next 7 top scorers that are going to be back this upcoming season. So, yeah, you clearly have a lot of veterans on this team, guys that have been there and done that. Now, Tom, let me ask you this, too, before we hit our break real quick, because Kofi Coburn, as I'm sure you are aware, has hit the transfer portal out of Illinois. How aggressively do you think – I would have to think Oklahoma State would at least throw a hat in the ring and then, just kind of test it and see what happens. But how aggressively, realistically, would you expect them to be maybe to look at something like Kofi Coburn, for instance?
Well, considering what I just said, that would be a good piece. I saw him play a bunch for Illinois, and to me, he's physically imposing. But to me, he's a feast or famine guy. I saw him play when he looked like he should be playing in the NBA, and I saw him some games where he just wasn't. He was out there, but he really wasn't there. He didn't contribute anything. But physically, he's enough to make you go, "Wow, this guy's unbelievable." So I'm sure that they made it overtures, not that he's in the portal. You got to test the water, right? I mean, you can't have him say yes unless you ask. But I don't really know what his leanings are. I don't know if he feels like he's a Kentucky kind of guy versus coming to Oklahoma State, or hell, there's probably other teams in the Big 12 that are, knocking on his door as well. So,
sure.
But if you saw him walk in the door, you'd go, wow, this is the piece. This is the final piece we need. We're going to the Final Four. But I want to warn that I have seen him not look the part with Illinois, and I'm a little I wonder why he's booking it. I mean, unless he had enough Underwood, maybe that's it. I don't know, but it seemed like he had a pretty good, secure playing time position there, and all of a sudden he's leaving. So you have to wonder why he's leaving on that account. I mean, to me, that would be a question I'd ask.
Well, and Tom, can't you just see the storyline already playing out? Oklahoma State takes Kofi Coburn away from Brad Underwood. Oh my goodness, they just continued. I mean, can you hear? I mean, I can already see it being written right now. If that were the case, that's going to be the storyline.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I mean, that would be the first thing somebody would say. Hey, we finally got Underwood back. We taking a big man from him.
Oh yeah.
But to me, that would just be a storyline. The next thing I would ask, what in the hell can you do when you get here? Will you be as a key piece to this puzzle? Because there's a lot of talent. Like I said, there's a lot of runners and jumpers on this team. Now, he's not a runner and a jumper. He's a jumper, but I don't know if he's a runner. But I'm telling you, how much you got so much to have to deal with. How can you integrate all these parts and make them all run together? Because you got a lot of guys who think they should be playing every minute of the game. And I'll be interested in seeing how this coaching staff, of which many are new to Oklahoma State and many are new to these people, how they put all this together. But there is no doubt. I mean, let's call it the way it is. This is the most talented roster of players that Boynton's had here at Oklahoma State. And if he can keep them all for the first practice, then we're going to see how they work together. And that'll be the big question in my mind.
Yeah, no, I'm with you too. It's going to be exciting to see, what's gelling, what's working. We'll find out more, of course, obviously, as we we get through football and then get into basketball. But it'll be here before you know it. So there's your latest news with OSU basketball. NC State added to the schedule in that tournament, along with a couple of other teams. When we come back here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Tom and I will take a look at it. As he mentioned, we're just about halfway through Major League Baseball this season. What's the biggest surprises? What's some of the biggest attention grabbers so far? What are the biggest storylines? What should we look forward to in the second half of the year? We'll get into all that coming up next here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
I'm gonna puke, cause my taxes are due. Do my password begin with a 1 or a 2? Been a hell of a ride, but I'm thinking it's time to grow.
Metronome.
Man, I'm up to something. Woody-la-dee-do, thank you all for coming. I hope you like the show, cause it's on a budget. So woody-la-dee-do, yeah. Come on, here we go, yeah. Come on.
Here we go.
So put your best face on, everybody pretend you know this song. Everybody come hang. Let's go out with a bang.
Welcome back in, Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network on this Tuesday. Patrick Wheeler with you, Tom Dorado as well. Live at Stillwater Milling Agri Center, 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. The AeroQuip portable cattle chute is made to move, and cattle ranchers don't like to be tied down or limited to one place when they're working cattle. And the AeroQuip portable cattle chute goes where you go and where your cattle handling needs are. So make sure you come and take advantage if you are in need of something like that. Stillwater Milling Agri Center will help you out, and much, much more available here as well. 502 East 6th in Stillwater. All right, Tom, so as you said, believe it or not, we are just about halfway through this entire Major League Baseball season as it continues to roll on. There's a lot of different things going on within the sport. And as far as biggest surprises, I still think it's fair to say, at least for me, that what the story about Shohei Ohtani continues to be somewhat of a surprise, because clearly, you know, after what he did when he came into the league and kind of took everything by storm, then, you know, injuries and stuff, and then fell off last year and all that. There were a lot of people with the hot takes of, wow, that you know, he'll never be back to that. He'll never actually be a true two-way star. And well, now we're seeing he quite literally is, as he will pitch and hit in the All-Star game, which is just really unbelievable. What he continues to do. However, Tom, I think, for instance, with him specifically, the lack of overall discussion and coverage of that story shows you, I think, just how much baseball kind of has actually fallen off on a more of a national focus when it comes to sports, because we're sitting here in July, okay, and baseball runs July. It should be the biggest story in all of sports of what he's doing. We have literally seen nothing like it since you go back to maybe Babe Ruth. And it's really impressive. It's something you don't see in sports, a two-way guy like this, and it's not getting as much attention. I feel like this is just not something that has garnered a lot of talk, a lot of looks, but it should be, and I really do think it goes back to baseball just not being a huge attention grabber as far as getting people involved and wanting to watch and that type of thing. But I think in any other time, years before this, before baseball was the way that it is now, it would be the biggest story in sports, and everybody would be talking about it.
I think location has something to do with it. The team he plays for has something to do with it. If he would play in New York, right or wrong, for either team, if he was playing in Chicago, even Boston, I mean, the attention would be there on a daily basis. What he has done would be magnified a lot, and he has done tremendous work at the plate and on the mound. I think people just forget he can pitch it too.
Yeah.
So I think he's probably the victim of location and the team he plays for, but I still think what he has done has been off the charts. And again, there's no doubt in my mind. They got 100 papers in New York and radio. I mean, if he was playing for the Yankees or the Mets, it'd be all over the place. I mean, you'd be sick of it by now. But the fact that he's playing on a team that I don't know if they underachieves, but my goodness, they've had Trout for years. They added Pujols when he was going to be a good addition. They go get a new manager. And now they got Ohtani, and they're still wallowing around. I haven't looked at their record, but are they even 500? I don't even know if they're 500. I
don't think so. I
think that all costs them, if you will. But the people who have watched him and what he's done, oh my goodness, he's a home run every time he swings, pretty much. And they're not cheapies, the things he hits.
No, not at all. They're tanks. So you're telling me that you see it as a low, and I agree. I think location absolutely something to do with it, but you don't think that it's kind of a transparent view of how baseball is looked at as far as a bunch of people around the country that are involved into it? Because I'm telling you, I think if this were if we were looking at another sport, whether it be football, basketball, and you had a story where a guy was able to do a lot of different things, we'd be talking about it forever. But you don't think that it has anything to do with baseball just kind of falling off as far as relevancy to a lot of people around the country?
Well, I think baseball has been its own worst enemy, and last year being a great example of that. I think Ohtani's legend and the story will certainly pick up beginning with the home run derby coming up in less than a week. I think what those who are not on top of what he's done and just look at a number, I think they'll get their fill of what he is and what he's done for the sake of when is the home run derby? Is Monday night? I forget when it is. And then the actual game itself on Tuesday night. I think from then on, those who are just casual observers will pick up on, man, I wonder how many home runs he's going to hit. Is he going to hit 60, going to hit 70? What's he going to do? So I think his celebrity will take off beginning this weekend over in Denver when All-Star activities begin. But I'm kind of with you in a way. But baseball's done it to itself, Patrick, in my mind, with the uncertainty of last year, cutting it down to 60 games. They couldn't get along, owners and players, money. People get turned off with that. And then you had the pandemic on top of that, which kind of compromised the game a bit. You got players out there with masks and coaches. And I think people kind of cooled on the sport last year, quite frankly. And it may take a while to get the heater going again and get people back on top of it. We don't have that many great races going on now in divisions. I mean, I think without a doubt you probably could pencil in probably 3/4 of the division leaders in both leagues, I think, right now, and put them into playoffs. You may disagree on that, but I think the wild cards are pretty much set in each league. So we'll see over in the second half, and really in the second half, because most teams are way over half mathematically. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I agree with you to some extent. I think they've been their own worst enemy, but I do think the Ohtani legend will take off starting this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a good place for it, clearly, when it comes to the home run derby, the All-Star game and things like that. But you look back, obviously, last year, Tom, and it was a mess. You couldn't get everything fixed in terms of players and owners arguing back and forth. You were having to deal with COVID. How many games were you going to get in? I know you remember we went back and forth on all of that. It was new news every single day about what was going to happen. So that was all, I think, a mess. You dealt with some of the new additions to the game as far as the rule changes and things like that we're seeing here again in 2021 kind of trickle over. And it just seems like, we talked about that attention is gone a little bit. As much as Major League Baseball has tried to, at least what they've said, hey, we're going to expand this game. We want to expand the interest of it. We want to get more people involved. I'm kind of like you. I think when they've attempted to do that, they've shot themselves in the foot more often than not, and they've actually made it a lot worse. That started with the whole idea of, hey, we're going to save some time but throughout a game and make a game shorter by doing this and this and this. Well, none of that has actually panned out in any way, shape, or form. And it's been a disaster in terms of trying to make that work. So I think overall, baseball has a lot of things they need to fix, but maybe, just maybe, the Shohei stuff, for instance, can actually, if people do start learning more about it, paying more attention to what exactly is going on, can help bolster the game, get it back up to where it was in terms of interest level, because this used to be, and I know, people are kind of finally starting to get a chance to come back out. We've seen the stadiums get a lot more full around the country, which is good to see too. And things are heating up when we get the All-Star game, which I think, by the way, Tom, another big reason you've seen some people turned off this was the moving of the All-Star game from Atlanta to Colorado. We've talked about politics in sports a bunch of times. A lot of fans don't want it. That was a big-time one right there where you saw a lot of backlash coming from that, too, and I think that drove a lot of people away. And a lot of it, too, Tom, you know where I'm going with this. it goes right back to Rob Manfred. Every single thing leads back to his lack of decision-making, and when he does come out and make one, it's never the right way. And I just think that he's had his issues, and when it started, it didn't really necessarily start with Houston when all the cheating went down, but when he failed to do what he did there in terms of punishment, things like that, it just kind of snowballed to where we are now. And I think until he is no longer commissioner, you're going to keep getting these wacky ideas, these wacky rule changes brought up, and then things that are voted on and discussed, and there's going to be a lot of negative reaction from players and things like that. I don't think it changes anytime soon until he is out. Plain and simple, what he's done and has not been beneficial in any way, shape, or form. The only time, and you can go back and listen to me, Tom, because I did give him credit last year. A little bit. The only time I gave him credit was finding a way to get baseball back and being instrumental in that, as well as kind of joining the players. And whenever all those outbreaks are going on with the Marlins and Cardinals and stuff, like, hey, everybody chill, we're still going to play. That's the only time. But other than that, I think it's been a complete disaster from the top there for Major League Baseball.
And let's put it the way it is. Major League Baseball, any year, even if it's healthy and there's no controversy, and there's no spider tag and all that. This is not the time of year where professional baseball, MLB, enjoys a lot of celebrity, because this is the beginning now of anticipation for college football on a normal year. Can you imagine now, abnormal going to quote normal, what the headlines will bring in the month of July, and certainly in the month of August when workouts begin. So Major League Baseball will take a back seat anyway, as they usually do. Whether they can garner enough celebrity and attention when playoffs roll around, that'd be a discussion we can have in September. But I do think they've hurt themselves big time, the way they have managed things. And I don't know, when you're worried about instant replays and you're worried about checking a guy's hat and you're not paying enough attention to a guy who just is a home run every time he swings, your point is well taken there, but I don't know what they can do about it.
Yeah, that's something they're going to have to figure out, no doubt. Hey, Tom, real quick before you go, let everybody know again who they can hear if they tune in tomorrow to Where Are They Now, because I know you got a good one coming.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time with Brian Jones. Again, we say Brian, and his dad is Scott Jones, and he rides the coattails of his son. But Brian, I think he's in his 20th year as the video coordinator with the Colorado Rockies, and we're going to have him on tomorrow at 5, but we're not going to necessarily zero in on the Rockies, especially you don't want that after they beat the Cardinals 3 out of 4. You probably don't want that. But we're going to go behind the scenes and see what the Rockies have to do, and including Brian, if anything, as the hosts of the All-Star Weekend, especially on short notice. And we'll see what's going on behind the scenes there. So Brian will join us at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We're going to talk All-Star stuff.
Ask him if they're going to check Spider Tack for the All-Stars.
You know what? I bet before the first pitch, they're going to go out there and check. And keep in mind now, those umpires are going to have to work overtime because they bring a pitcher every inning in the All-Star game. So they have to check 9 innings.
Hey, you guys remember the Funky Chicken?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll bring the Funky Chicken back, and he'll go out there and check for the Spider Tack. Because remember, he used to mess with the umps and players.
Let's do that. Let's see if we can just add just another way to go about this. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, let's make it more of a gimmick. I'm telling you, man, what a mess. I'm with you, Tom. We talked about that the other day. Oh, they're going to bring all those pitchers to the All-Star game. What? Are there going to be 20 different checks? Is that really
There will be. Sure, there will be.
Oh, my goodness.
We don't want any of that cheating going on in an All-Star game, for crying out loud.
That's what I told you. They need it for the home run derby. They need to go check those pitchers too.
Well, I think they need to check those bats for the All-Star for the home run derby. See if there's any cork in them. Oh man!
Just check it all.
Don't get me started, please.
Oh man, it's gonna be something else. That's been Tom Dorado. We appreciate him as always, and again, make sure to check out Where Are They Now tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We'll be talking to Brian Jones there, and he'll get some good stuff coming from him, and a lot of relevant stuff coming up for the All-Star game. Tom, thanks so much, man.
All right, Patrick, talk to you. I guess when you get back in here. All right.
Yeah, we will do that. That's Tom Dorado. Again, appreciate him as always. Okay, hour number 3 of the Robert Allen Friend Show is coming up next. We'll dive into, we got some stuff to get into with Aaron Rodgers, some of that news. Aaron Torres, another Aaron, is going to join us in about 20 minutes or so, and we'll dive into college sports and his angle on all of that as well, and then much, much more coming up still in the third hour here of the Robert Allen and Friends Show. This is Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Welcome inside hour number 3 of the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler here with you, Jordan Woodruff along as well. We're live at Stillwater Millie Niagara Center, 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. You can get Sweet Licks Meat Maker for your goats right now. If you have goats and you don't want to feed them what you feed your horses, cattle, or other livestock, Sweet Licks Meat Maker for goats is a mineral nutrition supplement that's designed for max performance and potential for your goats, as well as if you are a farmer, homeowner, or rancher, make sure you come in and check out these huge selections of summertime Western apparel that they have for guys, gals, teens, and kids. They have Wrangler jeans, cinch shirts and jeans, and cowboy boots, Roper, Justin, Ariat, Twisted X, clothing and work boots from Tingley, Carhartt, and Red Wing as well. You're going to find everything you need for your home, farm, ranch, much, much more here at Stillwater Millie Niagara Center, 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. All right, so we're going to dive into a little bit of this Aaron Rodgers stuff going on. He's kind of been a little bit off the news recently, just kind of doing his thing, whatever exactly that is, mainly taking vacations, not talking about football. And, of course, he was promoting the match that is upcoming in the golf tournament there that he's going to be taking part in, where you have Aaron Rodgers and Bryson DeChambeau going up against Tom Brady and Bill Mickelson. So surely that will garner a lot of attention and people will tune into that. But as he was talking about that yesterday, I believe it was, he went on to talk a little bit about what's kind of been going on for him in the offseason and mentioned, he's really been focusing on the mental health side of things and making sure everything is good in that department. And then he went on to say this. This is his quote. Sometimes the loudest person in the room is not the smartest person. Sometimes the loudest person in the room is not the person who has all the facts on their side or the truth on their side. Sometimes there's a lot of wisdom in silence. Sometimes there's a lot of wisdom in being selective on what you say. This off-season, I've spent a lot of time working on myself. All right, so whatever proverb that is, I don't know. I mean, it was probably written up on some cave wall somewhere or something like that, or on an ancient tablet or something. But that's the proverb that Aaron Rodgers spilled the other day. And here's the thing. I understand Aaron Rodgers in terms of what he's going through this offseason and what he wants to accomplish, at least I think. But all of this like cryptic messaging and things like that, and it's all on purpose, we know. It's just gotten a little tired. And this right here is more of the, just picture Aaron Rodgers sitting on the top of a cliff with sunset, talking about, sometimes the loudest person in the room is not the smartest person. I'm like, come on. Can we just get to training camp and see what happens? This is the latest in the saga, and I think, again, bottom line, this is Aaron Rodgers taking one more shot, and I'm sure he'll get a couple more in before the season comes around, but one more shot at Packers GM Brian Gutekunst. He has gone back and forth with him this entire time, and it's just another call out of this situation. And look, I'm not one to brag all that much, okay, but this was something I talked about quite a long time ago, actually, when it came to what Aaron Rodgers is doing this offseason. You look between the lines and you can firmly understand it. You go back to a couple years ago when the Packers decided to choose Jordan Love and in the draft, and they traded up to do so, right? Everyone was freaking out. Oh, my gosh, what does this mean? Aaron Rodgers, we heard the stories. He went on his tequila binge and had to take a week or two off to just kind of process what just happened. His replacement was here, and the Packers were ready to move him out and get on to the future when it came to Jordan Love. How did he respond? Well, he comes out the next season and goes MVP on everybody, and then, of course, proceeds to lose in that NFC Championship game to Tom Brady. But he did go MVP. And that performance put the Packers in a big-time pickle. And it gave a lot of leverage to Aaron Rodgers because he would be in somewhat of the same situation right now had he not had an MVP season, but the fact that he did made it so much easier for him. Then on top of that, you look at what we heard, and I think this has gone completely overlooked. But Brian Gutekunst admitted that he didn't communicate well enough with Aaron Rodgers about picking Jordan Love, and the Packers didn't communicate overall as well as they should have with Jordan Love. And that right there, that statement, I don't think got enough attention. Because first of all, I'm thinking to myself, look, if that's true, how does that happen? How do you not involve Aaron Rodgers? You don't have to, but how do you not? At this point in his career, wouldn't you at least make him a little privy to what's going on? So if that was true, that there was this lack of communication, Aaron Rodgers is not a dumb guy. He understood what he could do this offseason in a big trolling fashion. What was that? Well, a big part of it was, how about I also have a giant lack of communication going on this offseason? And this cryptic stuff that he keeps saying, these weird proverbs that he's throwing out and throwing shots like he did with Kenny Mayne on ESPN, like he's doing now where he's talking about, sometimes the loudest person in the room is not the smartest person. That's obviously about Brian Gutekunst. Sometimes the loudest person is not the one who has all the facts, same thing. So he continues to take shots. But all of this is throwing it right back into Packers space. He's going to say to himself, all right, so you guys told me that you had a lack of communication. I'm also going to do the same thing. But here's the thing. The more I think on this, the more I see him stirring the pot just one last time and eventually still showing up in Green Bay. Like, he's a different cat, plain and simple. But it's possible that all of this was to just put the Packers through it, to put Brian Gutekunst through it. Whether he meant to do it with the players and the coaches is beside the point. I don't necessarily think it is. It just kind of became a byproduct of everything that he's been doing and saying. But all of this is to make this offseason as tumultuous and as drama-filled as he possibly can. And then potentially come back and say, you know what, I'm going to sign this extension. Green Bay's my home. I'll continue to go out there and play. But at the same time, man, this is, I'm still going to have plenty of things to say about my own GM and owner. Now, will that make him look like a bit of a chump? Yeah, I think it will. After all this offseason where he talked about, I'm not coming back. I refuse to play as long as Brian Gutekunst is the GM, and then he shows up and plays. It's going to be an awkward and weird situation when that does occur. But would anybody be surprised at this point? I just don't think that's going to be a giant surprise based off of what Aaron Rodgers continues to do, and it's all on purpose. It's all strategized. You go back to when the bombshell dropped on draft night. It was like an hour or two before. Everyone was freaking, Aaron Rodgers, says he's not going to come back. I mean, yeah, that was obviously something that was leaked on purpose, and I'm sure that you had Adam Schefter in the back pocket, and Aaron Rodgers said, "Hey, put this out there, man. Go ahead and let this be known here on draft night. I need that spotlight." And it's all going to start there. Then what do the Packers do? They go on. They refuse to get a wide receiver again, where I think Brian Gutekunst said in that first round to himself, "Hey, you know what? Aaron Rodgers wants to play this game. I'll play it back. I don't care. I started it a little bit here. I can go back and do it again." So there is this back and forth. As far as where would he land if this doesn't work out, I still have to believe the Broncos are in firm position. They've been the favorite this whole time, and it makes too much sense. They've got quarterbacks that they can give up. They may have to part ways with one of their playmakers, although if the Broncos could find a way to not allow that to happen, they would be in prime shape, I think, to really be contending, especially right now. You've seen a bunch of different teams in the AFC West, and you've thought to yourself, all right, Kansas City is on a different level. So how do these other teams attack and have a chance to try to dethrone the Chiefs? Well, the Chargers do what they did. They ran into their future quarterback. They're set. The Raiders have been in talks of trying to get Aaron Rodgers potentially or get rid of Derek Carr and make a big-time move. And then the Broncos. All these other teams are involved trying to find a way to get over that hump that is the Kansas City Chiefs that are in their way right now. And it's a hump that's unlike any other really in the entire league. So they know they have to find a way to make things happen right now. Jordan, I know that you are you're a Broncos guy. So if Aaron Rodgers came over to Denver, would it be like this immediate? Oh man, we're gonna go win the AFC West. We're gonna have a chance to be in the Super Bowl, or is it gonna be man? I don't know. Aaron Rodgers, with everything that he brings over and kind of what he said and the baggage he has attached to him, we don't really want. I mean, where would you be on the fan base side of that if he were to be the new quarterback of Denver?
I'll take him because he'd be better than anything they've had since Peyton Manning's twilight years. But I would also be realistic. A lot of people wouldn't. They'd immediately say, hey, AFC champions, Super Bowl, here we come. We've done it with Peyton Manning. Now we're going to do the same thing with Aaron Rodgers, who's probably a little still within his good years considered what Peyton Manning was. But I would be more realistic. I would understand the baggage and stuff like that. That part of it doesn't bother me. But I think sometimes it's just kind of, does he really solve all your problems? One guy solve all your problems? I think we find out in the NFL, any professional sport, even college sports, one guy doesn't solve all your problems that you have. So I'd take him and immediately make Denver better, but I'm not saying that they're Super Bowl bound or anything. They may be playoff bound, and I guess that would be a welcome refreshment. So if he wants to come, go ahead and get him, Denver.
It would be one of those situations, too, where you look at the age and you think to yourself, all right, we're only going to sign him here for a year or two if we really think that it's a win-now situation. Because you would have to most likely get rid of a guy like Drew Lock, which, by the way, I think the Broncos are okay with doing that. But they know, okay, we could get a couple of years out of Aaron Rodgers. By the way, he could fall off at any time, as some QBs do. With that age and with injuries and things like that. Now, Aaron Rodgers didn't show any signs of slowing down, but if he comes over to Denver, there's potential that it could end up disastrous, the way that the Broncos have had things go for them. But they do need a quarterback, and then Drew Lock clearly isn't the answer. Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think, is going to be the answer, so it would be a huge upgrade for them potentially. But the question is, will Aaron Rodgers actually be willing to move on? I think that's still where people are questioning if he's true to his word with all this. Because Brian Gutekunst isn't going anywhere.
Wouldn't it be a total Aaron Rodgers move? The match, they're having that tonight, him, Brady, and Nicholson, and all them. Wouldn't it be a total Aaron Rodgers thing? Just like at the end, just say, "Hey, I'm going to Denver." And not like get excited or anything. Just say, I'm working out a deal with Denver. Be there tomorrow. I mean, and just blindside Green Bay. I just feel like I don't think that would happen, but I just feel like that's a total Aaron Rodgers move.
Oh, 100%. And the way that he's been saying things this offseason, I think that he still look. The Packers are somewhat in the palm of his hand when it comes to some decision making. But that would absolutely be something. He's like, I got the spotlight again. I'm back out here in sports. Let me make sure everyone knows I'm heading over to Denver, by the way.
Aaron Rodgers' agent needs to, leak that out and say major announcement coming for Aaron Rodgers during the match later. Just leak it out because, it'd be great publicity. And then it can be like, it could just be something announcing that him and his girlfriend or I guess, it's like we were taking the next step, not even like engagement or whatever, or they may be engaged now. I don't follow Aaron Rodgers' love life. It can get pretty complicated, but I just feel like that would be like a perfect thing. Just somebody leak out major announcement coming up tonight during the match for Aaron Rodgers, and it just have everybody wanting to tune in and ratings would be off the charts even more.
Oh, yeah, big time. It would be an opportunity. And then he comes in at the end, hey, the announcement is Shailene Woodley and I, we are headed to our next vacation in Brazil. We can't wait, and we're really excited to get there. So if you have any recommendations, let us know. Anyways,
I'm skipping OTA. I'm going to skip OTAs. That would be the announcement. Not big news.
I refuse to show up to training camp. Yeah, that's basically what I think we would hear. So there's the latest in the Aaron Rodgers drama. Continues to go on. The best news, we're getting closer to training camp, so a decision ultimately will have to be made by somebody here in the next month or so. So we're on pace for that. We come back here on the Robert Allen and Friends show. Aaron Torres, Fox Sports Radio, is going to join us. He covers college football and college basketball extensively as well, and we have a lot to dive into with him. About all the changes that we mentioned at the beginning of the show in college sports, maybe specifically what some of those could mean for different sports here at Oklahoma State, and much, much more. You never know what Aaron and I will dive into. So we'll come up with him next here on the Robert Allen and Friends show. You're listening here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Levitating off the blacktop. Used to struggle getting started, now I can't stop. Used to be the quiet kid in the sandbox, now it's hands up.
Welcome back in. Robert Allen and Friends show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network, Tuesday edition. Patrick Wheeler here with you. on this Tuesday edition of the program, and we continue live from Stillwater Millie Niagara Center. Make sure you come check them out, 502 East 6th over here in Stillwater. And joining me now, a good friend of the show. I haven't talked to Aaron in a while, but my guy Aaron Torres is back with us. You can find him on Fox Sports Radio and on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. Aaron, it's been a while, man. What's going on?
Patrick, it has been a while. How you doing, man? Everything good?
Yeah, man. You know we're rocking and rolling over here as we always do, and taking a look at all the biggest storylines. You know what? I think that college sports. You know, I said this to open up the show. If you think about where college sports has gone in the last few months in particular, I don't know if we've ever seen these types of seismic changes that we've seen recently in terms of NIL, the ruling of the Supreme Court on the educational benefits and things like that. On top of that, the transfer portal. I mean, I feel like this has just been a monumental shift in where we're headed as far as college athletics.
There's zero doubt, man. You know, I don't know that there's ever in college sports been this much change over such a short amount of time. And, you know, the NIL stuff, I think most everybody was kind of in agreement. It was time for the players to get something. But it is still shocking, you know, seeing all the different things that are coming out. I mean, obviously the big report today was that some company in Miami is going to, you know, give money to every single Miami football player, which I think is great, by the way. Like good for the, you know, backup tight end that, you know, he doesn't have to make 80 catches, or if somebody, you know, hurts their knee, or somebody, you know, whatever happens, that they still get a little cut of it, and it's not just going to those elite players. So it's a brave new world. You know, I mean, I think college sports definitely looks and feels different, but I would also say at the end of the day, I don't know that it's going to feel that different once we kick off in week one, once college hoops kicks off in the winter time. You know, in some ways I'm kind of happy. I think the days of people complaining about the poor disenfranchised college kids, which frankly hasn't been true for a while now, but that narrative, it's done. I mean, it's done. Anybody who's complaining about it, it's going to fall on deaf ears. So the players are getting, you know, what their market value is. You know, I think because of the way the TV structure is set up, I hope it doesn't hurt the Olympic and non-revenue sports in the bigger picture. But overall, I think it's been a fascinating few weeks in college sports. It's definitely changed things, Patrick. But I don't know that we're in a worse place, or, you know, any of the stuff about college sports being over as we know it. I think we're still in pretty good shape.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that as well. You know, as far as the NIL in particular, do you expect any type of recruiting disparities to show up in any major way with schools? I mean, you obviously had the interim rules thrown in a little bit to where everybody can benefit right now. But should we be expecting to see some stories pop up about recruiting disparities amongst maybe some big-time schools coming up here because of NIL?
So, I really don't think so. Now, what I would say is two things. One, I do think this idea that, you know, you can't use NIL as a recruiting enticement, it can't be quote-unquote pay-for-play. I don't know how you regulate that, especially with, as you alluded to, Patrick, the federal courts basically saying, sorry, NCAA, we're not going to side with you on topics of this nature. So where that leads us to 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, I don't know. But on the flip side, what I would also say is I still believe that the best recruits are still going to choose basically the same schools, and the schools that put them in the best chance to succeed both on the field, on the court, and post-college. And so I'll give you an example. I don't know how to say the kid's name, so I feel terrible, but the number one high school player in America, high school class of 2021 in football, JT, big defensive lineman out of the Washington State area, Seattle area. You know, he delayed his commitment because he wanted to make some college visits, so he is a member of the class of 2021. Over the weekend, he committed to Ohio State. And, you know, to me, what that was reflective of, and I know that he basically, his entire recruitment was pre-NIL, so I understand it's a little bit different, but I just bring it up to say, to me, that's still reflective of, I think, how the top players are going to treat recruiting is, yeah, I could take this much money to go to, you know, Purdue or Illinois to play football, or Washington State or Washington or whatever. Ohio State still gives me the best chance to compete at the highest level. It still gives me the best chance to prepare like a professional and be ready to be an NFL player in 3 years from now. I still don't think that changes, Patrick. Listen, Are there always going to be kids that go to the highest bidder? Of course. It's been happening before NIL rules go into place, and I don't think that's going to stop. But what I do think is going to happen is I think the really elite players, they're still going to say, in football, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Clemson, whatever, Oklahoma, give me the best chance. In basketball, it's Gonzaga, UCLA, Kansas, Kentucky, whatever. I don't think that changes seismically because of NIL.
No, yeah, I think you're on to something there too. I think that's definitely fair. And speaking of college basketball, for example, do you think that the idea of NIL, the no caps on education-related benefits, all that stuff, the freedom that these college athletes are going to have, do you think that deters some of these high school athletes now specifically for going to the G League, for example, or something like that in college basketball? Because we've seen, that was a big story last year. You had a couple of guys, Jalen Green was one of them, like, hey, I'm going to the G League. I'm going to skip college. I'm going to go straight there, make some money because I couldn't do it in college. But now that that's a thing in college athletics, do you think that more players will say, you know what, let me go to this college instead of going pro, and then I'll have a chance to get my education. I'll have a chance to make a lot of money while I'm there. Maybe it's a better option for them.
I think it's 100% accurate, Patrick, and I think it goes beyond just that G League, the professional routes for high school players. I think part of it is at the college level, too. I mean, we're seeing right now, so for people who don't know, and I know probably a lot of your fans are college hoops guys and girls, but the deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft, the NBA draft has been pushed back because obviously the NBA season was pushed back to December this year. So the draft is normally basically right around this time, maybe a week or so ago, and the draft gets pushed back, and the deadline to withdraw from the draft is tomorrow, actually at midnight. And so what I think we're seeing is I do think we're seeing a handful of athletes that probably a year ago would have said, you know what, I'll start my professional options as weak as they might be, as bleak or as meager as they might be. I'm going to start them now because my time frame to make money, to make real money, is so small. And so with NIL, whatever it looks like, I still don't think we're going to be at a point where, and I could be totally wrong on this, I don't think we're at the point yet where kids are going to be making millions of dollars as college athletes. I could be wrong. There's a great example in your state, Spencer Rattler, of a guy that could potentially, in theory, if he has a big year, who knows what kind of money that he'll be making by the end of the season. But I bring all this up to say I think whether it's fringe basketball players, whether it's football players that potentially are second, third, fourth, fifth round picks, I use as an example a guy out of the Big 12, Sam Ehlinger this year. I know it's a new coaching staff. He was ready to move on, but that's the kind of guy. He was a fourth, fifth round pick, whatever he was. In future years, does that kid with the extra year of eligibility that he had decide to say, you know what, instead of being a fourth, fifth round pick, let me come back. I'll be the face of Texas football. I'll probably, be more prominent here than I will be as the backup of the Philadelphia Eagles or wherever he ended up. And so I do think it's going to have a benefit on college sports in terms of retaining a lot of those really good college players that don't necessarily translate directly to the pros as super high first-round picks. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but that is one thing that I do expect to be a byproduct of all this NIL stuff.
We're talking to Aaron Torres here on Triple Play Sports Radio. I'm going to put you on the spot here because with all the talk of NIL, of course, one of the fun topics that's been brought up is, okay, who would have been the all-time earner in college football or basketball, and who would have been that guy? And for me, it was easy. I had to go with Johnny Manziel because I feel like, especially if social media were even more prominent, though, back then, I think that also would have bolstered it to the next level for him. But do you have a guy specifically, maybe in college football or basketball, you think if NIL had been around, he would have made bank?
It's so funny you say that. So I actually had this debate of, I think there's this idea that, a Bo Jackson, a Herschel Walker, Christian Laettner, the Fab Five, but as a friend told me, and I thought they brought up a really good point, is if there was no social media, how are these, because it feels like most of these endorsements are going to be social media based. I mean, I did mention Spencer Rattler looked like, something with Raising Cane's or something like that. But anyway, I bring it up to say, two immediately came to mind. One was Tim Tebow. Because the thing about Tebow, I think people forget now, was the longevity and how he won the Heisman as a sophomore, comes back, wins a national championship as a junior, I mean, this guy was the face of college football for 3 years. I mean, this isn't, Joe Burrow bursting onto the scene in September and he's gone by January. I mean, 3 years back to back where he was the face of college football. So Tebow was one, and then Manziel's the other one. The stat I keep throwing around is directly after Johnny Manziel's Heisman Trophy season, Texas A&M raised $500 million. I sound like Dr. Evil from whatever it is, Austin Powers. $500 million for renovations to Kyle Field. And so, if you're talking a 0.5% of 1% of that goes in Johnny Manziel's pocket, and we know it would have been much more, I can't even imagine. By the way, I'd also add, Johnny Manziel admitted to making over $30,000 signing autographs under the table. So imagine if he could do that over the table. Imagine if he, even if it was just as simple as autographs, doing a little mini summer tour the season after he won the Heisman, what he could have done on Cameo in this era. I mean, I'm not even talking about signing with Coke or Nike or Pepsi or whatever. I'm just talking about the cameo appearances, the signing tours that he could have done. Those were the two that immediately jumped out to mind, Tebow and Manziel.
Yeah, Tebow was next on the list for me too, but I'm with you. It would have been endless for those guys. And speaking of college football, are you in favor of the playoff possibly expanding in the coming years?
I still kind of feel like 8 is the right number. But what I would also say is, I get why we're going to 12, or that is the preferred model as they kind of finalize it here in the coming months. And the structure, it does make sense. I like that you're giving the opportunity for the 4 best teams to get a first-round bye. That gives you, the Alabamas, the Georgias, Clemson's motivation late in the season. 5 through 8 would obviously get a first-round bye, which gives them motivation. And, one thing, Patrick, that I keep coming back to, the opt-out thing in bowl games has been real for a while now. But I'll take it a step further is, last year we saw, and people are going to blame the pandemic, we saw a lot of kids opt out with 2-3 games left in the season, and I thought that was the future of college football is, kids saying, I came in with dreams of winning a national championship. We're 7-3 with 2 games to go. I'm out of here. I hate that. I don't like that. I think it's, the antithesis of why you play sports is the team model and all that stuff. But I do think that's where we were going, and so I think having that carrot of really everybody in the top 25, the top 20, whatever, is going to be playing for something late in the season. I do think that does add value to that conversation, and I hope it keeps kids on the field. And listen, I understand injuries are a real thing, and you can't be too careful and all that stuff. And, if you're 4-8, I don't blame, or even if you're 7-5 going to a meaningless bowl game, I don't blame you for making the decision that you did. But I just look at it as, when you really peel back the layers of why the decisions have been made, I get it. Like I said, I would have preferred 8. It still feels weird that late season games, aren't going to mean quite as much. I used the example, Florida last year lost its final regular season game as a 24-point favorite. They lost in the SEC championship game and still would have made the playoff last year. I don't know that I like that part, but I think the good outweighs the bad with the 12-team playoff.
Well, and it's not college basketball by any means with that expansive field, so you maybe don't expect this crazy Cinderella story. But do you think there's going to be a potential underdog that actually makes a run eventually, or should we expect more of the it's Ohio State, the Alabamas, the Clemsons that at the end will find a way to still be there, maybe not as much as parity down the line as some people would still want.
Yeah, this is for this coming season, Patrick.
For when the playoff does expand?
It's a great question. What I think it'll hopefully do, and I say this as somebody who lives in the Pac-12 footprint, I hope I think what's happening now, Patrick, is that, the gap between Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, maybe 1 or 2 other programs, Oklahoma, Georgia, Notre Dame, that gap is getting bigger, not smaller. And so what I do hope it does is over time balances the playing field a little bit in terms of recruiting, because I just mentioned number 1 high school player in America from Washington State ends up at Ohio State. But I do think part of that, and listen, Ohio State's always going to get guys. It's Ohio State. They've been good forever, and they're going to be good long after you. As long as college football is being played, Ohio State's going to be, towards the top of the sport. But, I do think living in this Pac-12 footprint, it kind of gives me a unique perspective, and maybe you guys feel the same way in the Big 12 footprint where, Texas is losing, the state of Texas is losing a lot of guys to Alabama, to LSU, to Clemson, whatever, places like that. And I look at the Pac-12, and I do think it's going to be good for USC. I do think it's going to be good for Oregon, UCLA maybe, hey, you don't have to go to Ohio State to play in the playoff, and if we get to the playoff, we're going to have a chance to win it. And so that, to me, is, I think, one of the big benefits will be outside of the opt-outs. And so I'll be curious to see if that has the effect that I think that it does. I think for these next few years, as we figure it out, I still think, like I said, that gap between Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State is going to stay big. But I do think and by the way, it's the second tier teams in these conferences as well. It is a school like Oklahoma State. It is a school like Iowa State if Matt Campbell's still there. It is a school like Tennessee or Auburn in football where you don't have to just go to Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that yes, as time goes on, some of these other programs will be able to narrow the gap. We'll see if it happens, but I'm hopeful that does happen.
Aaron Torres with us here on Triple Play Sports Radio. So another one of the big moves was obviously caps are no longer allowed on educational benefits. You saw the Supreme Court Rule 9-0 there, kind of dunk all over the NCAA in that fashion. But, for instance, last year for Oklahoma State, you had a guy like Cade Cunningham that was here in basketball. For you, would it be tougher, in your opinion, for a school like Oklahoma State to end up landing big-time players like that because of maybe the package you'd have to set aside to bring in a guy that's the caliber that he was in terms of a player, football, basketball, all of that. Maybe we won't see as much of that anymore where some of these second-tier schools in the conferences aren't landing big-time names because of the benefits and the educational stuff like that you would have to set aside just to entice him to come over. Do you think that we're going to see less of that for some of these schools?
I hadn't thought of that. It's really interesting. Obviously, Cade, his brother was an assistant there. I live in L.A. Right. USC, the potential number 2 pick, Evan Mobley, his dad was on staff at USC, and, his dad's a great coach. But, does USC, it was a package deal. I mean, there's no denying that. I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective. It is kind of interesting to think about. But what I would still say, at the end of the day, listen, yeah, the answer is yes, right? Like if you can't pay a brother or a dad, $500,000 or $250,000 or $300,000 under the table to get a kid and do it completely legally under the old NCAA rules, then yeah, it changes the dynamic. But what I would also say is recruiting at the end of the day is about relationships. And I've argued this for years is, if we're to assume that everybody was offering, a Cade Cunningham something. Everyone was offering his family something, whatever, this and that. Like at the end of the day, there has to be something beyond just money if everybody's offering whatever. And so, with Cade Cunningham, people outside of Stillwater, and I know this better than anybody, Patrick, people outside of Stillwater scoff at the idea that Mike Boynton actually had a great relationship with Cade Cunningham. Like, that's a real thing. That did happen. Like, Mike Boynton was the first person to offer him a scholarship, and, I've talked to Coach Boynton about this, is, he said, I got to know Cade well before I got to know his brother. I got to know Cade well before anybody thought he was the best player in America. And Cade told me himself, he goes, Coach Boynton believed in me before I believed in myself. And so, listen, am I going to sit here and lie and say if Oklahoma State didn't hire Cade's brother that they would have gotten him? I don't know. But I also think if it was only about hiring the brother and Coach Boynton hadn't spent 4 years getting to know Cade, building that trust in Cade, I don't know if that recruitment happens. And so I still do think that at the end of the day, it is about relationships, but it is an interesting question, Patrick. I hadn't thought about it.
Well, and you mentioned the recruiting aspect of it too, and with the new transfer portal rules and all of that as well. How does this change recruiting for some of these coaches? Do they focus more on maybe who's in the transfer portal, since it kind of is essentially a free agency of sorts, if you will, or is there still as much focus on some of these high school guys, and maybe it's split up in a weird way? But how do you think that the recruiting aspect changes for some of these coaches with all these new rules?
It's great. I think the NIL stuff we're still learning. I do think the portal is huge. And the portal, I'll say this, I feel bad for high school kids in football and basketball and really, I'm sure all other sports. I don't know the other sports as well. But what I would say is you look at a perfect kind of confluence of events where coaches couldn't go on the road to recruit. At the same time, the one-time transfer rule comes into place, and there were a lot of kids that were impacted at the high school level that just couldn't get opportunities. Now, I think now that schools can have players on campus for football and camps and evaluate in that regard, I think that'll help in football. I think coaches getting on the road in basketball helps. But I bring it all up to say is that the portal's a real thing, and a couple things. I think one, at the mid-major basketball level, and I think we're going to get there with the group of 5 in football, I think coaches are being more cautious about the high school players they bring. I'll give you an example. I had a basketball coach tell me straight up, he said, I can't recruit high school players anymore because if they play too well, they're going to transfer up. And if they play poorly, they're going to transfer down, and they want to play right away. And so I'm going to take a transfer that I know when I get him, he's used his one-time transfer, and he's going to grow with me in the same way that a high school kid used to. And so, do we see that impact in football? I don't know. Do we see the depth charts being hit in football? I don't know. I think it's still early in football where the transfer stuff has been a little bit more prevalent in basketball really over the last 6, 7, 8 years in a way that it hasn't yet become that way in football. But I do think, not so much the NIL, but the transfer stuff really has changed recruiting in a lot of ways where a lot of coaches in football, in basketball are saying, why am I going to take a chance on an 18-year-old, never lived away from home, never been in a college weight program, never taken college classes, all that stuff, as opposed to a 21-year-old that maybe the upside isn't as high or I don't get to keep him as long, but he's done all those things. He's played college sports at this level. I've seen him on tape against similar competition to what he'll face at my school. It is a major game changer. I don't think people really realize the long-term effects of that portal and what it's going to mean.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's going to be a big-time change. And last thing here for you, Aaron, and I talked about this earlier in the show, but I want to see what you think. Do you think that all these changes in college sports played into, for instance, Roy Williams saying back in April that he was done, Coach K announcing this will be his final season, and maybe down the road here we see some of these older coaches like those two kind of call it quits and say, I'm not going to deal with all this, going to move on. Do you think that all of that played into specifically their decisions and might for some of these other coaches in college basketball and college football here in the future?
Patrick, I'll just tell you, I made this argument for a long time. It did, and you can say that it didn't. Yeah, not you, but people can say that it didn't have an impact. It did, and I'll even take it a step further. Is somebody like Urban Meyer, like Texas wanted Urban Meyer, and the reason Urban Meyer, by all reports, didn't go to Texas was I really don't know what the next 6, 7, 8 years of college football is going to look like, and I don't know that I want to deal with it. And what I've also argued is I do think the guys with options – now, and I make this point and people always freak out. Somebody's always going to want to coach Ohio State football. Somebody's always going to want to coach Oklahoma football, Duke basketball, Gonzaga whatever, UCLA basketball. But what I would say is that I do think the guys with options, at some point they're going to sit there and say this, look, I have players now that are getting endorsement deals. I don't have a problem with it, but I can't control it. And let's see where it is 2 or 3 years from now. But who knows if it devolves into the star quarterback has to miss practice for a commercial shoot. I don't know, but I'm just saying. But on top of that, you're going to go into recruits' homes now, and they're gonna say, you got me you got your last guy a deal, a sponsorship here. I want a sponsorship there too, or I'm not coming. That's going to happen. There are going to be agents in recruiting meetings now. And so on top of that, you have the one-time transfer rule where basically everybody is a free agent every single offseason. The guys with options, the Ryan Days, the Lincoln Rileys, the Coach Ks, the Roy Williams, they're either going to just get out of it like a Roy Williams, like a Coach K. And I think the ones that have the opportunity to go to the professional ranks, I think all of a sudden are going to look at that more seriously because they're going to sit here and say, wait a second now, I'm already dealing with agents. I'm already dealing with free agency. In the pros, we have somebody to deal with that for me, and I can focus on coaching. That someone is called a GM, and I'm not going to have to deal with it. But anyway, Patrick, I appreciate it. I do got to run, but thank you for having me, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining, and appreciate your time. We'll talk to you later. That's
Thanks,
Aaron Torres. Yeah, appreciate it. And you can follow him on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. Covers Fox Sports Radio. Hosts on there a couple times during the week, different things, and of course covers college hoops and college football. But I think he's spot on with most everything he said there, involving the coaches, the transfer rules, the NIL, all of that stuff. Man, it is here, and there's a lot of different angles to take and look at it. College athletics continues to change right before our eyes. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Aaron_Torres and check out the Aaron Torres podcast too. He always has good stuff. He's had Coach Boynton on there before. He's talked to Kate Cunningham on there, so always getting good stuff there. When we come back here on the Robert Allen and Friends show, we will say goodbye. I'll tell you one thing that I learned today that's coming up next year, Robert Allen and Friends show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Whoa. Staring as I go. Gave until my soul hurt. Never told them so. They're watching as I fall. Somewhere down below.
Welcome back in, Robert Allen and Friends show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler here with you on this Tuesday as we get ready to say goodbye. Thank you over here to Stillwater Milling Agri Center for hosting, and be sure to come check them out. They have all kinds of great clothing items that you can choose from right now, especially summertime Western apparel. Agri Center has Wrangler jeans, thin shirts and jeans, cowboy boots from names like Roper, Justin Arion, Twisted X, clothing and work boots like from Tingley, Carhartt, and Red Wing, and much, much more. People have been taking full advantage of that today, as well as getting a bunch of gardening and outdoor supplies. If you're a homeowner, a farmer, or a rancher, this is your one-stop shop. Stillwater Milling Agri Center, 502 East 6th. All right, so I'm going to say look at one thing that I did learn throughout the show today, and the focus has a lot been on NILs we've talked about. Certainly still the biggest story going on in sports and in college sports. And there's been a lot of different things that we've seen athletes already latch on to with endorsements and things like that. But kind of a cool story coming out of Texas, believe it or not. Texas quarterback Casey Thompson, who was supposed to be the guy this upcoming season, he signed up with Cameo, which is actually something that Aaron Torres just mentioned in our last segment there. Cameo is a social media site where you can do personalized video messages that come from celebrities, athletes, things like that, but it costs. It's a fee. So he charges $50 right now to do these Cameo appearances, but he doesn't want to pocket any of the money himself. All of that money is going to go to No Kid Hungry, which is a national campaign that fights and ends trying to end childhood hunger. Thompson said this, most importantly, all proceeds go to NoKidHungry.org. That's an organization that helps bridge the gap between the 1 in every 6 Americans that go hungry every year. As many as 13 million children in America could go hungry this year, and I'm happy to donate all the proceeds to the organization. So that's pretty cool, even for Texas football, right? Not a lot of Texas football fans that I'm sure end up listening to the show, but you do see something like that, and it's cool to see, and I think we're going to eventually see more of that. Some of these players are certainly going to end up benefiting financially a lot from name, image, and likeness, but when they can turn it into helping out those in need, that's where you're going to get some of your silver lining if you're not a fan of this name, image, and likeness stuff. So a cool story there from Casey Thompson over there at Texas, and I hope we see more and more like that.
Patrick,
as name, image, and likeness continues to go.
That can lead into what I learned today, as me and you
Sure.
need to create a Tom Dorado cameo and do $50, and you and I take 25%. We take another 25% to charity and give Tom 25%. So actually, maybe we give it all to you because maybe you need the money, but maybe that charity keep Patrick Wheeler around. But yeah, I was joking with Tom about that, saying, "Hey, let's start a cameo." Tom's like, "I don't need the money." I go, "What if we can make money off your name, Tom? Will you help us?" Hey, he wasn't too much into that, so.
Tom Dorado would love to make sure that I got money off his name.
Just yelling at kids for their birthday?
Now.
Just yelling at kids for their birthday? I mean, come on, you get 100 for that. Get off my lawn.
Just calling him a yard bird. I mean, people would pay for that in a heartbeat. I think he would have a lot of very heartwarming messages to send out to the youth that would be involved. So I think we're definitely on to something there. And Tommy D, I know if he's listening right now, he's just shaking his head.
Yeah.
And he's just rolling his eyes at that idea. But I'm on with you on that. That's it's something that I think we're going to see a lot more of eventually with some of these college athletes, maybe some more prominent names. We've already heard some of that before where, hey, I'm going to get some money here. I'm going to get some cash for my name, image, and likeness, but I'm going to spread the wealth. And I'm sure we'll see more of that from some of these top players. This has been the Friend Show here today on Triple Play Sports Radio. Been filling in for Robert. I'm Patrick Wheeler. That's Jordan Woodruff. Appreciate his help as always. Big thanks to Aaron Torres for hopping on the show and giving us some time, too. We'll have that interview up eventually if you didn't catch it. So you can go back and check that out on the YouTube page, Triple Play Sports Radio there as well. Coming up next is TV 31-1. Then after that, the Afternoon Sports Drive. Levi Peckinpah and Zach Lancaster will be filling in for me, so check them out later on today. Of course, I got to thank Tom Dorado, too, for joining in on the show. And then thank you to Stillwater Milling Agri Center. Come check them out over here at 502 East 6. They'll be doing business all day and help you out with everything you need for your farm, home, and ranch. This has been the Robert Allen Friend Show. I'm Patrick Wheeler. Everyone have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday.